Well, I got a few speakers up. I sent an invite to Ian and John. If you guys want to jump up, I don't know if you're seeing that. Otherwise, send me a request and I'll bring you up. But I'm super excited to be hosting this space. Obviously, the conversation has been popping off over the couple past days about EAC and Christianity. So we got a crew here, and we got more people slipping in. We got Christians, we have tech optimists, we have EAC folks, we have tech skeptics, even a number of non-Christians. I know Bayes Lord, one of the founders of EAC, is also going to be popping in. I don't think I see him yet. But we got quite a diverse crew here. So to start the discussion off, I thought I would just maybe give a little bit of a rundown of what brought me here and where we are today. So the other account that was running the music, and I apologize for that, a little bit of a ghetto solution, trying to figure out how to stream music through Twitter Spaces. I guess it's not as easy as I thought it might be. So that account was the Crypto Conversion podcast that I run with a couple other folks, and we speak to Christian builders in emerging technology, starting out with Web3, blockchain, and we've kind of expanded to AI and to virtual reality, even some life extension topics. We're kind of all over the place now. And recently we hosted a conversation with Ian Wyatt on the thinking of Teilhard de Chardin. I don't know if anybody here is familiar with that name, but I think some of that thought has pervaded to some extent the EAC space. And I'm really not that familiar with EAC, so I'm kind of curious to really see what the origins are and where there might be compatibilities with Christianity. But we hosted that convo, and then we did a convo with a Frank Tipler on some more astrophysics related discussions of the Omega point and the progress of human development. So we did that, and then I got a response from a Drew with an EAC in his bio about the Frank Tipler conversation. So if Drew's here, he's kind of my origin to thinking about EAC. And so I started diving into it, trying to figure it out. I listened to a clip of Beth Bezos on Lex Friedman probably about a week ago. Didn't really dive that deep into it. And then I just posted on Thursday. I said, hey, any Christians in the EAC space? Just kind of curious about it. And obviously that's where it popped off. And that's where we are today. That's pretty public history. So obviously a lot of Christians, a lot of you responded and said that, yeah, you're Christians in the space and you think there's a lot of synergies between EAC philosophy and Christianity. So that's what we're going to be discussing today. I do want to make it clear I'm not an expert, obviously. I've just explained. I've probably listened to the highlight reel of the Lex Friedman podcast, and then I just engaged with the conversations on Twitter. So I'm kind of where a lot of you, I think, in this space are, as I don't really know a whole lot about EAC. So we're going to be learning. But a lot of EAC folks who are Christians, including Nominus. So if I sent you an invite too, if you can pop on, send me a request, because I want to bring you up first, I think, because you were the one who initially responded to my tweet and explained really what the tenets or what you thought were the tenets of EAC. So I think if you give us a rundown of that, that could be super helpful for listeners here. But I will say I'm not familiar with EAC, but I am very much familiar with the conversation surrounding tech optimism and tech skeptics, particularly in the church and Christianity. We've talked to a lot of folks, like I said, in emerging technologies, Ian on concepts relating to Christian optimism of the future. Michael Whittle with Pulpit AI, developments of AI in the church. Father Ian Van Heusen, who's developing virtual reality. Lots of people. And I will say all of them are facing opposition, not from atheists, not from transhumanists, but from voices within the church. And these voices, I will say, I think in general, the direction of the thought is a scourge on Christian thought and Christian effectiveness. I am firmly a Christian futurist. I think we need to be developing the technologies that will define the landscape of the future. I think this is highly important. And although I understand some of the reasons Christians particularly might be skeptical of new technologies, or at least the thrust of new technologies and where they're taking us, I think that we can't allow our fears to get the better of us. We really have to be diving forward into the Christian future. So I'm a tech optimist because I'm a future optimist, because I'm a Christian. And so that is my standing point. And if we can work with EAC folks, great. I think Christian futurism and effective accelerationism do have a lot of similarities. But there's some of you that have voiced some concerns, particularly about the language in the space. So I want to hear about that too. So yeah, we have a pretty good group. But let me throw it over to Nominus, if that's how you pronounce your name, because you originally shared what you thought were the tenets of EAC, and it was really good. So why don't you just give us a rundown for that? And if I can find it, I will put your tweet on the Jumbotron. Dominus, are you there? Can you unmute? Might be having some trouble. All right, I don't know your name, but just use a pen. Do you want to unmute and maybe give us your perspective on EAC? You said you're definitely a tech
Yes.
optimist, and you've been dealing with this conversation in
Yeah,
the
can you
Christian
hear me
space for a
okay?
while.
Great.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I'm really glad that I get to go first and maybe frame the conversation a little bit here. My name's Justice, actually. Justice Epen. It happens to also be a sentence. And I definitely believe that Christianity and effective accelerationism are not incompatible. And I've got a pretty important theological reason for this. And so I hope that I can maybe frame the problem for everyone listening, which is, the original question maybe 5 or 10 years ago about artificial intelligence and superintelligence was a question of value alignment. And I think that's still the problem. And the doomers, I think, have been very overrepresented in their analysis of this problem. But value alignment is not a new problem. People think that it's a new problem because we're we have short-term memories. But value alignment is an ancient problem. In the Garden of Eden, we had a value alignment problem. And so in the Christian worldview, there is no new value alignment problem. God has been preoccupied with value alignment since the lapse in the Garden of Eden. So we shouldn't be surprised that man made in the image of God suffers from problems of aligning the values of its creation with itself, right? Like God is dealing with this problem with man. Of course, man will deal with this problem with his creative endeavors. And so the question of value alignment shouldn't be looked at like as a new and novel problem to solve, but it should be looked at as an ancient problem that we have been dealing with now for thousands of years and getting progressively better at it, I might add. God is good at dealing with this problem, and he has offered us many solutions to dealing with that problem. And then, so I'd like to start with that as just an orienting suggestion. And then I'd like to also look at some of the Christian worldview and what it says about technology in particular, and the kinds of technology that is more prone to generating value misalignment. So again, just
I think that conversation too is going to develop.
And so if I could just put forth maybe kind of two models for looking, or two examples of kinds of technology that we have in the Christian worldview. As early as Genesis, you see technology, and the first instance of technology that I think matters here is the technology of the ark. Okay, so God commands Noah to build an ark. And Noah, out of his obedience to God, builds the ark. And the ark is a salvific mechanism. It's what saves mankind from the flood. And so there's at least in scripture, at least one instance, there's actually multiple instances of technology being commanded by God, but there's one case of technology being commanded for a salvific effect, and that's the ark. And it's obviously very well known. There's probably multiple examples that I haven't even thought of, but the ark is an example of salvific technology in obedience to God that is effective. And then in the same book of the Bible, you've got the Tower of Babel, which is an example of technology that is built against the will of God and for the glorification of man. And so they build the Tower of Babel so that they can reach the heavens and be like God. And God obviously tears the Tower of Babel down and strews man all over the world with different languages, etc. And so what you have in the Christian worldview is that technology can be good by means of its obedience, and it can be evil by means of its disobedience and its self-aggrandizement, it's glorification of the self. And so these are basically the 3 points that I was hoping to just lay down as early in the conversation as possible and kind of provide what I think is a Christian framework for dealing with technology and the creative endeavors of man, which is that this problem of value alignment is not a new problem. It's an old problem. It's one of the oldest problems ever. B, that we have examples of technology being commanded in the Bible for salvific effect, in obedience to God, for the glory of God. And C, that we have the counterexample, which is that technology that's made to glorify man is destined to fail and destined to be a disaster. So with those things in mind, I think that effective accelerationism is very much compatible with Christianity insofar as that it is subservient to the glory of God and the advancing of his kingdom. So that's all I had to say, at least at the top. I'd be happy to hear people's objections,
Great.
but I don't think any Christians here will have any problem with those comments.
I really appreciate that rundown. Nominus, if you want to unmute and give us a brief introduction maybe to EAC and what brought you to the space. And to anybody who joins, if you want to just give very briefly an overview of what you do in the space, hopefully you're building something. If you're one of these people who just do nothing but think all day, that's great. But I think we have a lot of Christian
Sorry, can I just throw my introduction out there too? Sorry, I should have done that. I'm not just a nobody just thinking about this all day. I work at Truth Social, Trump Media and Technology Group. We are building social media for freedom of speech at scale with a very small, tiny team. And so, yeah, we're building stuff all day, and I run our internal tools team. So it's not like I'm just a non-tech guy who has no idea what I'm talking about. Yeah, sorry. Cool. I should have introduced myself. Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it. And all right, Nominus, if you want to unmute, and also Base Lord, if you want to request, I'll get you up.
Hey, yeah. I'm glad there was such a turnout. Yeah, I had some complications earlier because I'm recording the space, so there should be a transcript available, and I'll probably run it through some type of AI model to summarize it after. But yeah, I'm mostly a builder, actually, more so than, I think a lot about things, but mostly a builder. But this is one problem that I've thought about for a long time, going through, engineering school, taking classes like that, since I was a teenager, and reading sci-fi books since earlier than that. And also just being part of the faith since I was born, really. I was born Catholic, but I've been a part of basically every denomination at this point, because various reasons we just switched around. But yeah, so one thing about the denominations is that that might be relevant here, actually, is that God tells us not to compete amongst ourselves or to argue amongst ourselves over little things. And Jesus's main point when he arrived in the New Testament was basically overarching: focus on the big things. Don't let these little things get in the way of what we should really be doing towards God, which leads you into kind of this conclusion that of value alignment, or I'm not sure what other technical terms could apply, but that Just Use a Pen was getting into is really God put us here to toil, right? And to have some dominion over this realm. Of course, we messed it up a lot of it, but but he's commanded us many things, to multiply, go forth and multiply, to do your work with all of your heart and all of your effort. And to me, all these things basically point theologically towards technology is not a bad thing. It's just part of existence, right? It's like if more technology is a bad thing, then using sticks to make fire would have been a bad thing at one point, or something like that. Like I think it's actually like a little bit of a it's a little bit of an underestimation of the infinity of God, and what He's able to create, to say that any one technology could be a boon to His kingdom, and the spreading of it, right? And like in books like Hyperion,
So,
I don't
not
want to go
sorry,
on too
Nominus,
long.
if I could just
Sorry.
direct you a little bit.
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
sure. Yeah, please.
Can you just briefly give us maybe what you would say are the tenets of EAC? Just brief headline that you think are compatible with Christianity? Because I think that's what the thrust of your tweet was.
Oh, the tenets of EAC, basically, I would rather have Bazelord go over the tenets of EAC, but I could respond basically from a Christian perspective.
Yeah, we want to hear the Christian perspective, so that's if you could just provide that, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. That's basically, yeah. Yeah, my perspective is basically that, though, that basically technology and hyping it up is not against God's will, or anything like that, as long as you don't worship it as an idol.
Okay.
Yeah, which is probably going to be a new problem coming up with more secular people. So,
Well, I think that's kind of what the conversation is, and some of the people that are concerned about things, I know Ollie just put a thumbs up there, is mainly about the language, the mimetic language that we're using in the space. So I do think that is probably, I think most of the people here are in some degree or another tech optimists. The question is really, is EAC compatible enough with our Christian tech optimism that we can also identify as EAC along with identifying as Christians?
Hello,
John,
Connor.
is John still?
Can I interrupt, Connor? Because
He was
I would like
talking.
to.
yeah, I
Joseph?
hope that explains some things, though. So I'll,
Yeah, Joseph, if you wouldn't mind, if you have some time, I would like to bring up John Stokes, I think.
No,
To
absolutely. No problem.
Perfect. Thank you. Is John still in the space? Is it okay? I don't see John. He's probably I know he was having some audio issues, so he's probably hopping off and hopping back in. Okay. Oh, there he is. All right, perfect. And I want to bring up John because he is a Christian building an AI right now, and
I
he's
was having
expressed
some issues,
that he's had a lot of
yeah,
problems.
with the
Yep.
audio.
Why don't you just go ahead and tell us exactly why you say you identify or associate with EAC as a Christian building an AI?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I would say is that I don't I I'm happy to fellow travel with EAC and to be associated with it in the same way that, like, for a long time I was kind of like happy to more or less associate with some elements of classical liberalism or some of these things like this. I mean, I have kind of a transactional relationship to any human institution that's not the church, and the church isn't supposed to be a human institution. It's supposed to be human and divine, right? So whether it's concepts of democracy or human rights, or whether it's EAC or whatever it is, I'll check it out if it seems to be something that, like, I can use, and or something that is not like in conflict, or will help create a space where my church can do the kind of work that it wants to do, or where the church in general is like safe, and can prosper, then I'm interested in it, and like I can vibe with it for a while. If it takes a turn, well, then I'm out. So that's kind of where I'm at with EAC. I don't feel like I'm a techno optimist, I'm not scared of AI. I am not scared of it as a technology. I'm not scared of it, as some form of non-human agency. So I don't have the fear factor that the EAs have. Um, you know, so I would just say I don't. It doesn't pattern match to me as any sort of enemy. And then in what I guess Tyler Cowen would call a mood affiliation way, I get on with the kinds of people that are involved. But it's one of those things where I will happily identify as EAC and share a foxhole with EAC while we fight for open source AI and distributed AI, or decentralized AI, decentralized money, these kinds of things. But my first and foremost commitment is my Christianity.
Amen. That makes total sense. And as building an AI, you've had a lot of pushback from Christian voices, right, about some of the tech you've built. I put your tweet up there on the Jumbotron. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't, I don't know. I would say I've had a lot of pushback. I don't know which tweet is up here. I think this is the one. Yeah, I mean, the church, I find that in my church, so my background is American Pentecostalism. I find that, my church, people have different kinds of attitudes towards this. Some are very much opposed. Some are, interested or cautiously optimistic. But it's not like a big topic that I get a lot of friction over. I mean, I hear, different reactions to it, but we're less far advanced. I mean, Pentecostalism is often anti-intellectual, which is something that I love and hate about it. I'm speaking in mid-February at the Encounters Conference, which is a Catholic conference I'm on a panel on AI in Christianity. I have generally been more active in an ecumenical context than in my own church, but most of the time I find church people are mostly just curious about this. And I think that there's different, mostly I find curiosity and not hostility, I guess is where I should leave it.
Okay, perfect. Well, maybe, and I want to bring up Base to really give us, I guess, what EAC is, seeing as he is the co-founder. But first, if I can throw it to Michael, if you're willing to jump in and just explain what you're doing with Pulpit AI and maybe really the conversation that's going on between tech optimists and tech doomers or decels, as EAC people call them in the Christian sphere. I think that's an important element to this conversation.
Yeah, totally. Thanks for having me jump in. John, it's good to hear from a fellow Pentecostal building in AI. I appreciate that. Love
Thanks,
it.
man. Awesome.
Born and raised Pentecostal, so not born and raised, got saved as a Pentecostal. I think firstly, I would echo a lot of what John says. So I'm building a company called Pulpit AI. We're essentially a content repurposing app. For pastors, you upload a sermon to the platform and afterwards it turns it into various content. Very simple, actually basic usage of AI. Anyone who's building in this space would know that just by looking at what we're building. We got about over 1,000 people using the platform and we've actually developed what we think is going to be a pretty incredible unlock for pastors. That being said, my background is not in AI. I'm not a builder in the sense of I'm not a developer. When we announced and launched, we got a lot of pushback from not necessarily people in the church, and I would divide the kind of response we got into two types of people. First of all, let me step back and say people thought that we were an AI sermon writing app. And so I can actually understand the fear and or worry that would come in the church from well-meaning Christians, because as a pastor and a preacher and a teacher myself, I wouldn't use AI to help me, write a sermon. That wouldn't be how I would use it. But that being said, that was initially why we got a lot of pushback. Doing what we're doing. Now, we've essentially found that people who work at seminaries and who are Christian bloggers and journalists and people who like to kind of pontificate around theology want to maybe not love kind of really any use of AI in the church. But, you know, we talk to pastors of churches all the way from, you know, 30,000 people all the way down to 25 who are using the tool and love it. That being said, I think that, you know, there is a imperative. You know, our thing that we're doing is specifically being built to build the local church, which, by the way, if you're a builder and a developer, we just closed on a round of capital and are looking for some help, please DM me. We are ready to build something pretty cool to serve the church. But I think what we really need are people building in the non-church space and who are being faithful. I think it all comes down to, you know, what are we walking and how are we building under the lordship of Jesus? And I think if we're doing that and we ask the question how we're being held accountable, I don't call myself, you know, a follower of EAC. I don't like to live kind of under a label of anything other than disciple, but I would certainly be a techno optimist, and I would certainly believe that anything we can do to see people flourish and to see the church built, and also just as important, you know, for Christians to have an authority and a say-so in the space in general. I think the coolest thing, honestly, for me has been to see the amount of like founders and investors and people at massive tech companies like Anduril and Founders Fund and A16Z and like you name it. People have reached out to me and just said, hey, I'm a Christian. I'm cheering you on. Thank you for doing what you're doing. And we're really building something, again, very, very simple. So that being said, I think there are a lot of Christians like building in this space. I think probably, though, I will say what I have seen is that everyone that's building in the church space and people who are putting capital towards that are I guess less than inspiring. Something that I thought was interesting, though, you know, we're talking, and Connor, you just tell me if this is what you want me to share. You tell me, but there was a recent survey that I read from a company called Barna, and they asked about 12,000 pastors and Christians some different thoughts on AI. Now, you know, if you know Barna, you know, it's sort of most of who they reach is sort of the kind of seeker sensitive boomer Andy Stanley crowd. So that's a certain subsect of, you know, the Christian faith. But, you know, like 26% of people say that they're like strongly against knowing that their church uses AI or knowing that anyone who worked at their church uses AI in any form. So while I do think there's a lot of people who are optimistic about it, I do think that Christians at large, unfortunately can tend to be, you know, a doomer or fear-based when it comes to technology like this. A lot of it, I think, is around just them really not knowing what it is. So, yeah, I just appreciate all you guys being on here and talking and learning from all of you. Like I say, I'm kind of brand new to this, so it's just good to hear a lot of smart people give their perspective. So I'll let somebody else go for
Appreciate it. Thank you, Michael, so much. And I do actually have my pinned tweet on my profile is a breakdown I did of the Pulpit AI controversy and maybe some of the forces that were involved there. If anybody wants to check that out, I want to throw it to Base Lord. He, at least his Twitter bio says, and I don't really know a whole lot about EAC, but I guess he's one of the founders of this space. So that's no disrespect. I really just don't know. I really don't know this, but we're gonna bring you up, and I will say this is primarily a conversation for Christians in the space. We really need to work this out between ourselves. But Base has expressed he wouldn't call himself a Christian. He's not anti-Christian, but he does have some things to say. So let's all be respectful and hear about what he kind of envisions as the EAC movement. If you want to go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, hey, how's it going, everyone? Yeah, thanks for having me. Just like mostly here to like kind of try to understand how people are thinking about this question. I think like, yeah, probably there are a lot of similar questions people are asking, related questions in this cluster. I'm not gonna like go on a long, monologue about what EAC is. I think there's plenty of stuff out there. I don't know. A piece came out in Pirate Wires today. Friend Nadia and I put there in Pirate Wires. There's podcasts. Beth and myself both have done podcasts about this. I think, that all should be sufficient. I mean, there's a Substack. There's some information there, but I think Yeah, for me, I'm mostly just like curious about how everyone is thinking about this question, because to me, yeah. I mean, I think you know, I think you quote tweeted the thing where I said this earlier. It's like, yeah, I mean, I consider myself like pretty just uncertain about things, and I don't have like strong opinions on this kind of question. But I don't know. Yeah, I think I see things as generally compatible. I think part of this is up to people to decide for themselves, right? Like, I think, you know, if, right, for example, as was just discussed, right, some churches, some groups of Christians may think that, you know, using ChatGPT at all is a bad thing, right? And of course, like, there are going to be people who, you know, just think that for other reasons. I think there's like variance here that's hard to kind of capture in one go. So, yeah, I think I'm just kind of curious to hear how people who are like, you know, self-sampling into this space, right, are thinking about the questions of like, yeah. I mean, I think I'm also, I am genuinely like unfamiliar with like what people mean by like, you know, like practicing like Christianity, like what kinds of beliefs that entails, like about God, and like what kinds of things are and aren't compatible with that. I really actually don't know. Like, yeah. So I think I don't have a huge amount to say at the moment, but I think like maybe if we come up against points where there's questions or like, yeah, like points of contention or something, I think I'm very happy to like weigh in. But yeah, I don't have like a strong stance here. I'm actually, I just really don't know. Not being a Christian, I can't tell you if they're compatible.
Okay, appreciate it. And feel free to jump in if you have points of clarification. So I
Yeah,
brought up
I
a few.
could
Yeah,
say
go ahead.
something about that.
Dominus, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different theological branches, but basically what we believe is that the world is broken, right? And it's because of sin. And it's because we chose to disobey God, which is sin, because God is perfect. And so later on, Jesus was sent down by God there's some different, you know, theological ways to say it, but basically he saved us, right? And you've heard that before, but he basically paid the cost, to allow us to be once again, in harmony with God, and, basically washed clean of our sins, because in the past, the law, the Hebrew ancient law, is like the 10 Commandments, and more, but it's like impossible to follow. And yeah, so those are some points about like what we believe and stuff, but, I don't,
Yeah, and I think actually Ian might be able to speak a little more to this too. And I did just want to say in response to Bayes, I mean, let's not make any pretense here. Like, obviously, this is something of a meme. So I tried to bring on some people who strongly identify as EAC in Christianity, and I think in general most of the speakers so far would say, well, maybe I'm aligned with EAC, but I don't want to, fully identify with it. But if there is somebody, Ian, if you strongly identify with EAC, I would be happy to hear it, because I put EAC in my Twitter bio. So I'm a Zoomer brain. I'm going full in. Tech optimist. We need to just blow this thing up. So maybe somebody disagrees with that. But Ian, why don't you explain to us exactly what the alignment is with Christian tech optimism and EAC?
Yeah, you'll notice I don't have EAC in my bio, but I think it's fine too. Can you hear me, by the way, Connor?
Yeah, you're good.
Oh, good. All right. Well, I should add to what I think it was John said about just kind of the basic definition of the cardinal doctrines of the faith. Obviously, incredibly central throughout all of 2 millennia of Christian history is that Christ was killed and was resurrected. And God condescended to us through the incarnation and the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Now, something that follows from that that's really central to this conversation is that through God's incarnation in history and the person of Christ, God established the church. God established this covenant people that we as human beings can choose to be a part of. And the function of the church is to grow and fill the world and redeem history and transform the world. So Christ has all these famous metaphors that many Christians know in Matthew 13 about the kingdom of God is like a leaven. The leaven kind of transfixes and transforms the world the way that bread is leavened. Or the kingdom of God is like a mustard seed. It's small now, but it's going to fill the world. And we've seen that, happen in human history. Christianity was a small group of people in a little corner of the Levant and is the largest religion on earth with billions of adherents. But I mean, the way to answer the basic question that is the sort of title of this space is to ask, I think, and I'll set the labels aside for a minute just for the sake of simplicity. I like the label EAC, but just for simplicity's sake, I think maybe the easiest question to ask is just, should Christians have a view of technology that is optimistic, that's cosmic in scale, and that's engaged? So, an active agential role. We're not just passively watching God do stuff. We have an engaged eschatology. And I think clearly the answer to that is yes. So we can see in the Bible that the scope of eschatology is cosmic in scale. Psalm chapter 8 talks about God has created all of the stars, all of the heavenly host, and he's placed all of this under our dominion. Everything that God has created is under the feet of man. And Romans chapter 8 talks about all creation will be set free from its bondage to decay or its bondage to corruption. Which that's a chapter that always kind of sends chills down my spine because it seems to really prefigure entropy and the heat death almost. All of creation is decaying. This is something an Aristotelian at the time, or maybe an Epicurean, wouldn't have known. But Paul knew it somehow, that everything was decaying and it needed to be set free from this decay. So we've got cosmic and scale eschatology, and then that just leaves us with the question of, do Christians have an engaged role in that eschatology? And we talked about Matthew 13 a moment ago. The kingdom of God transforms the world. You can see this in Daniel chapter 2 as well. It's not just God that grows and grows and fills the earth. It's the kingdom. That's the people that God establishes on earth. That's us. And then, of course, the concluding chapters of Revelation 21 and 22, you've really got both. You've got this palpable visual description of the transformation and renewal of the entire cosmos. People have commented the concluding chapters of Revelation sound like science fiction. I mean, this is not a new observation. This goes back many decades, but you've also got a role for God's people in an engaged way there. The leaves of the tree of life are used for the healing of the nations. So you've got both elements. You need to answer that question. Eschatology, that's God's story for the future. It's cosmic in scale, encompasses the cosmos. And we have an engaged role in it. So insofar as that is EAC, optimistic, cosmic, engaged view of technology, I think Christianity requires that. It's not just that it's not incompatible. I think it's mandated.
Can I add to that?
Awesome. Really.
I was just asking, can I add to that? Because I think that he's making a very important point.
Yeah, I was trying to see who's talking.
So,
go ahead. Keep it brief,
absolutely.
though.
I just want to echo here because especially if we're speaking directly to Christians, I think that there's a few. So first of all, my brother here is saying that first of all, you have to get your eschatology right. And if you have a pessimistic eschatology, you're naturally going to be incorrect on the question of technology, which is a forward-looking, optimistic. And technology is intrinsically optimistic. There is an expectation that with creation of new technology, there will be positive outcomes. And so if you have a negative or a pessimistic eschatology, you're gonna get this wrong. And then I'm seeing in the replies, you're seeing this, Christians, they generally hate technology. And that's true. It is true that Christians so often hate technology, but that's to their discredit and also a symptom, I think, of their disbelief. We see this, in scripture, we're taught that we are freed from the bondage of the fear of death. And really that we're taught that there's only one entity worth fearing. There's only one thing that we ought to fear, which is Christ or God. And so, first of all, we have to get our eschatology right. Second of all, we have to stop being afraid of change and progress, because again, as my brother said, Romans 8, the whole of creation is groaning for redemption. And so then the question becomes, well, how does that redemption take place? And what is the working of God in his creation through his image in that creation? And I think the answer that's becoming apparent to many Christians who are astute observers of reality is that God seems to prefer to work through his image in creation. So not only is technology implicitly good because of its, generally speaking, its intent, it's not always intended for good, but it's often intended for good, and sort of implicitly carries with it optimistic it's implicitly optimistic, but we have to have an optimistic eschatology. We have to be looking forward to the redemption of all of creation. And we also have to be understanding that through scripture and through natural revelation, we can understand that man is participant or at least an instrument of God's redemption of that creation. And so what does that mean? It just means that we should expect for the redemption to take place through the means of God's preferred instrument of redemption, which is man, right? I mean, like, even when he decided to redeem man himself, he sent a man himself in the form of man to redeem man. So I just wanted to add on to that. I really liked what Ian was saying, and I just wanted to kind of expand on it.
Connor,
and
can I tack on something a little provocative there, or do you want to stay on this initial?
No, you can tag something on. I was just going to say, so I do have a few people that have already requested, and we have a limited amount of people that we can bring onto the speaker space. So if I kick somebody, it's because I'm trying to bring somebody on. Ian, go ahead and, again, keep it brief.
And Connor, this is Isaiah here. I'll pop in after that if that's okay.
Yeah, we'll bring you on, and then we're going to get to you skeptics, I promise. But I think we kind of need to outline, the optimist side first.
I thought I might just quickly kind of provoke some debate here, so that we're not all just sort of agreeing with each other. I want to just, for a few sentences here, in sort of a friendly way, also go on the offensive against secular futurism or techno-optimism. I was looking at Andreessen's techno-optimist manifesto recently, and almost anything in here, Christian with an eschatology would agree with. The vibes are good. You get down to the bottom of it, and he's got a list of patron saints of techno-optimism. And just two quick things I want to point out about this list that I think might be helpful here. One is that there's no Christians on the list that I recognize except John von Neumann, who became a Christian on his deathbed, although a lot of people on here were influenced by Christians. And it's notable there's no Christians on the list because Christians were futurists before a lot of these people. So Teilhard de Chardin in World War I is saying Christians need to be engaged with technology with the fire that inspires the conqueror. And then definitely before anyone on this list, Nikolai Fyodorov, the Russian Orthodox theologian, said specifically, human beings need to fill the universe and colonize every planet, and Christians should be driving this process. Late 19th century, before any of these people. So it's notable there's no Christians here, but point number two, this is what's important about that, is there's people on this list who said a lot of things that are definitely not compatible with Christianity at a deep fundamental level. I'm talking about Bertrand Russell, Nick Land, just, fairly nihilistic thinkers. But what's important about that, I think, is those people, not only are their fundamental beliefs really not compatible with Christianity, they're not compatible with sunny, optimistic view of technology, with his techno-optimism. I mean, Bertrand Russell, here's a guy who said, love is nothing. It's an accidental collocation of atoms. All things are destined to extinction in the void. There is no hope for redemption from the extinction of all things. And therefore, Russell said, of course, famously in A Free Man's Worship, we must build our habitation only on the firm foundation of unyielding despair, the complete inverse of techno-optimism. So I want to also suggest that, again, in a friendly way, I admire a lot of the things that our secular futurist friends have said about EAC and about techno-optimism. But really secular techno-optimism, not only does it kind of have to plagiarize from earlier Christian futurists, but it really can't, I think, sustain itself in the absence of at least something like Christianity. It's going to end up being kind of rudderless. It's going to lack a certain oomph or telos if you are relying on people like Bertrand Russell, who ultimately were not optimists, ultimately ended in despair, whereas these earlier Christian futurists like Fyodorov had the techno-optimism, optimistic view of technology, and also ultimate hope. And I think that's what techno-optimism or EAC requires, and Christianity can provide it.
Thank you so much, Ian. That was perfect. And I'm going to throw it to Isaiah, but I want to point out too, I was just speaking with Ollie, who we're going to bring up after Isaiah, about the mimetic language in the EAC space. And it's undeniably religious. So it's a testament really to what Ian is saying here, that you have to borrow something, I would say, from Christianity to really make the tech optimist point. And I would be curious too, Baselord, if you could engage with that after, perhaps, because, there's just undeniably something religious about the space. Cool. All right, let's jump to Isaiah. Go ahead. Give us EAC and Christianity, why you think they're compatible.
Yeah, thanks, Connor. So I'm Isaiah. I'm the founder of Valor Atomics. We're using nuclear fission to pull oil and gas out of thin air using nuclear fission. We're working on building the largest nuclear plant in the world to make really, really cheap oil and gas. I'm also a passionate Christian. I think that it sounds silly to say that Christianity is the most important thing in my life. I think it's just the ground and the center of existence. So it just kind of sounds silly to say. But I'm also deeply EAC. I was kind of following this from the beginning. I'm not sure. I think you follow me, Baze. I'm not sure if we Substacks and all that kind of stuff. But I think that in the early days, I hesitated to put EAC in my name, and I'll first I just want to say where it's compatible, but then I'll highlight why I originally hesitated to do that. So first on the compatibility front, I like some other people have pointed out, Christianity is deeply accelerationist. If you read the Old Testament promises, I'll just read one little piece from Isaiah here. So the wolf shall dwell with the lamb, the leopard shall lie down with the young goat, and the little child shall lead them. So that's one little piece. It's an interesting, man having this really deep dominion over nature. So that's one piece here. There's another one in Isaiah 65. It says, no more shall there be in it an infant who lives but a few days, or an old man who does not fill out his days. For the young man shall die 100 years old, and the sinner 100 years old shall be accursed. So this is very, very directly what we'd call life extension, right? So apparently in the future, people are going to live a lot longer than they're living right now. And then there's this discourse, of course, about whether or not that's referring to some sort of thing that arises of a spiritual reality, or if that's sort of technological in nature. And that's certainly a discussion you could have. But one way or the other, Christianity is, I would say, infused top to bottom with promises of what we would recognize as techno-accelerationism, right? We'd want, from my perspective, building an energy company, I want humans to have abundant energy. I wanted us to be exploring across the universe. I want there to be trillions of humans on, planets as far as we can see. And that is completely in line with the Great Commission. It's not just in line. It's really the reason for what I am doing. The commission in the garden, be fruitful and multiply the earth, subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea. And if you think about what technology is doing, it's fundamentally, it's lengthening the arm of man. That's what technology is doing. It's making our hands and our arms and our minds stronger, and it's increasing the leverage that humans have over everything around them. And then there's a moral question after that, which is okay, now your arms are much stronger one man can now command, an army of drones, for instance, whereas, 100 years ago, that was impossible. Our arms, our hands have gotten longer. Now, what do you do with that? And that's a moral question, right? But technology itself and sort of the increasing dominion of man over nature is deeply infused in Christianity. Now, the original reason that I would say I was a little bit hesitant on the EAC movement at first, even though I'm deeply optimistic about the future course of history and specifically technology. We're all going to be in O'Neill cylinders in 100 years if I have anything to do with it. But the one mark of hesitation there is, and I'm curious to get your input on this, base, is the transhumanist part. So there's this understanding in EAC, as far as I can tell, that there's a sort of an allegiance primarily to intelligence as an emergent feature of organization, sort of an extropic emergent property, rather than humanity. There's this allegiance to intelligence wherever it may form, whatever embodies intelligence maximally, rather than to humanity itself. And I think that arises out of sort of a materialist understanding of the universe. And fundamentally, Christianity is at odds with that, because in the Christian frame, Christ is the central and, ultimately authoritative figure of history and of reality, since he created it. And, he came to earth and became a man who's resurrected, and now all things have been put under his feet. And because of that, the church is also under his feet, and we are now the rulers of all creation. And I think that's very evidently being played out through history. We are seeing man become more and more the rulers of all creation. So when you have EAC come into that and say, well, it's not really that man will be the ruler of the universe, it's that intelligence will be the anti-entropy, right?
Yeah.
So Bayes, I'm curious to know what you say about that.
No. That's a lot of good stuff. I mean, this is too big.
Bayes, yeah, if you could respond to that, and also about the religious terminology in the space, and then I'm going to throw it to Ollie to also give his concerns about the language. Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so to this question about transhumanism, I think maybe I'll give my personal opinion later, but I think that my first point would just be that we're already transhumanists, right? We are already doing this. Every time we invent a new tool, we move beyond the way we were before, and it does pretty substantially change us, right? If we use medicine, that's some advanced biologics or some new thing like this. I mean, these are all manifestations of that. And so I think there's a question to me about how one would derive the line from, whichever sources of truth, you might want to refer to. I actually just am genuinely confused about how you would derive a boundary there, right? So if I replace my, language production module in my brain with an LLM that's way better and faster, is that too far? And then the question would be why? And it's well, what if I had a stroke? Right.
Totally agree with there being ambiguity in that line. And, I certainly don't have an extremely clear answer for you. I'm wearing earpods right now, and how different does it become when that, becomes a brain implant? But I think the larger question that I'd like, and maybe this is a straw man, so tell me if this is a straw man, but it seems like in EAC that the main allegiance is to intelligence, and there's nothing necessarily human about that.
Yeah, there's something in this word allegiance that I don't like, which is so to me, many of these aspects here are observational. It's what in the evolution of the universe, what seems to kind of be favored? What are the trajectories that seem more likely? I think, there's some emergent physics here or something. And I think part of these are early things that you're referring to, these early writings you're referring to, is attempts to try to capture some of what's going on there and what it might be about. And yeah, to me, I don't know, this thing about, it may be an uncomfortable fact that if we sort of zoom out away from Earth, you look at the whole universe, there could be we really don't know what's going on out there. We don't know what we're encapsulated in, right? We don't really know where any of this came from, right? So it's I'm very, very comfortable, with, the Christian perspective that the ultimate source is known. That's fine. I think I don't feel as certain about that, but that's okay. But there are many stones left unturned so far. And so to me, I think something that is troubling is like, I think my concern would be that we may very well just get out-competed at the universe scale, right? And so the question is like, and I mean in the sense of like in an ecosystem being out-competed. I think we don't know like what. So yeah. Then my thing here to kind of draw a line, or to draw a path between these two regimes is like, I would say, if we have free will, given by God, and we have the ability to build technology and part of the sort of space of programs that we can write on the universe computer is includes things like modifying our bodies or improving our brains, extending our brains, or moving our consciousness to new substrates. I think like it's hard for me to see these as things that would somehow be wrong. Like if I put myself in like a kind of Christian simulator, I would say my sense would be like, why would God give us the tools if those were things He didn't want us to do? Like that's confusing to me. If the answer is we shouldn't do those things, there's a boundary. To the question about the language, the thermodynamic God and so on, I think like this is about first of all, yeah, obvious first order thing is it's like a meme. It just sounds like kind of funny and like catchy and like it's such a meme that we're still talking about it, But the other part of this is just trying to understand like telos, I think, and I'm still trying to understand this in more detail for myself. I think like there is something very interesting here, and I don't think it's well understood. I don't think anybody has really explicated the full thing. I am, in the process of making attempts to understand it better. Not just with respect to this thermodynamic God thing, but like, yeah, what is going on? Like, what is the purpose of technology? What is the trajectory that we seem to be on? And like, where are we going to end up? What is the, what are we going to find? What tools are we going to find in our hands? I think like there is actually like I don't know. I'll have some pieces on this soon, but there is definitely a thing here, and yeah. So wherever you want to kind of like assign that the origin or like sort of the location of the generating function for those observable trends or patterns in the universe, that's totally up to you. I think for me, I'm like, as I said, kind of fairly agnostic. Like I don't have a strong opinion about this, but it does seem that it's there, and I think it's perfectly reasonably compatible. So I don't know. Does that kind of answer some of the thing here? I think this is actually quite deep, and it's like something that's very live in my thinking and writing right now.
This is perfect based, and I'll say the transhumanist argument, that's going to be probably a big part of this space. So I'm glad you brought that up. I would make the contention, and I've made this in tweets before, that the conversation around transhumanism is unfortunately very vague, and also often gets misapplied, especially in Christian circles. I don't really think a lot of what you described is technically transhumanism. And I know Ian also has some thoughts on this. But before we throw it over there, and Isaiah, great, I'm glad to have you jump in the convo.
I think Isaiah just was going to say one more thing.
All right, I'll give you a quick moment, Isaiah, but we got like a million people who want to speak, and I want to throw it to Ollie afterwards. Go ahead.
Yeah, totally get it. But, I'm funny and interesting, so I'll take another couple seconds. I'm just kidding. So, Baze, I think we are kind of hitting on like the core of where Christianity can actually be helpful to the EAC movement. And, I'm sorry my friend Augustus is in the UK right now. I'd love to have him jumping in here as well. But, so you're kind of talking about like, man, I have no idea what kind of tools we're going to find here. And I think in some of those earlier writings, like you were saying, you have this exploration of like, trying to think through that and like, where is it going and what's the point? I would just put forward my own viewpoint, which is it's going to trillions of humans on, every planet in the known universe. And it's going to be amazing and beautiful. But the reason is because Christ is on the throne of all of it.
Oh,
And
yeah, no, I would
the
totally
sub,
agree with that. I think that's, I would almost say that's amazing and like, let's fucking go. But like,
Wait, did
it's
you just
almost,
say you agreed Christ is on the throne of all of
let's
uh,
go. Base Christian confirmed.
yeah,
Let's go.
confirmed on record. Yeah, no, but I think that's almost like the mundane future to me. Like that's like table stakes for futurism to me, right? Like I think there's more. Yeah, I have a lot more to say about this, but anyway.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other thing about Isaiah is he's got like 5,000 followers, so anybody who has clout is definitely going to be brought up. All right, let's move to Ollie, because this is somebody who is a Christian, who is a tech optimist of some sort, but he has a lot of concerns about the EAC space. So this is maybe the first of that, and then I want to throw it to Ian to answer some of the transhumanism arguments, and then we'll go back to Ocean and some of you other people who have your hands up. Go ahead, Ollie.
Yeah, I wouldn't specifically say that I have concerns. Well, I guess I do have some concerns, but it's like the cultural pendulum is always swinging, and we're always trying to oscillate towards a sane way of looking at the world, right? And you can see EAC as the pendulum swinging away from the decel movement, right? But I think that what I have seen, and then once I kind of clicked, I really couldn't unsee it, was one, the obviously religious language, but I think that is not in and of itself a problem, because, well, of course this type of language is very captivating because it describes the patterns of our world, right? But I think what we all need to keep in mind, and I think even the most secular, the most materialist person can agree with, is that everything needs to be in its proper place, because if you take some lower good and you place it as the highest good, as your loss function, right? In COVID, we saw that safety was put as the highest thing, right? And then we saw what happened to that. You can see now in schools, safety is put at the highest, and then that comes to the detriment of other things. And you can see that in lots of other different places in culture, where if things aren't put in their right, like for example, equality as well. If you put equality there as the highest, then you see what happens, right? So you can see in EAC a lot of the time, we're putting technology as the very highest thing that everything else is subservient to. And you can see this in all the language, where it's like, just accelerate technology with no barriers or no recourse. And it's also, I'm loving how people are talking about with the purpose of the technology. What is the telos of the technology, right? Are we creating this technology to self-glorify, are we creating the technology for the betterment of the individual, or for the betterment of all, or for service to God, whatever type of language you want to use, right? And then speaking specifically about the language, I just want to give an example. I'll just read out a Beth tweet, and then just kind of, if you can just kind of interpret what I'm saying from this kind of a theological kind of lens, right? So basically, on his Docs account, whatever, he makes a tweet about solving for the theory of everything. He's talking about some physics stuff, and then he quote tweets.
If
And
you want to share the tweet, I'll put it on the Jumbotron, Ollie.
Yeah, I'll just DM it to you real quick.
I think you can just put it on the Jumbotron. Yeah.
Okay, so basically, he's saying, in order to get answers, we will have to ascend the Kardashev scale. This ascent will unlock perception into this higher energy band. Then we will need the intelligence to understand what we see. Energy plus AI scaling are the truly fundamental missions. So you can kind of see this, these symbolic parallels, right? In order to get answers, and it's a very kind of vague thing, answers. And then when you kind of look at it from this lens, you can see the Kardashev scale is kind of is acting as a replacement of the ascent to heaven almost, right? And it's like this high energy band. It's like, it might be hard to interpret what I'm saying, but when you look into it, sometimes the technology is replacing, is being as the primary loss function. It's being placed at the very top of the hierarchy and saying, in order to get all of our answers, all of our problems can just be solved with technology. What if we just develop these certain technologies, and then all of humanity's problems will be solved? And I think that is the real problem here.
And I think that's kind of the argument when it comes to transhumanism specifically, which is what order of creation is humanity, and where do we place machines? I mean, I was responding to somebody on my Twitter feed who was obviously not a Christian, who was suggesting that AGI was eventually going to ascend to the point where it would compete with humanity. I don't see it that way, but I know there's a lot of people who are concerned with that. And so those are the questions of transhumanism. So if I can throw it to Ian, because I know you have a pretty direct, succinct response to this, and then I'm going to throw it to Ocean to also share some of his concerns.
Thanks, Connor. And Isaiah, great stuff, man. I really just want to affirm everything that you said. I forgot Connor's rule, by the way. So I'm not a builder. I've just represented builders in court. Builders, I don't understand technology well enough to do what you do. I do understand technology well enough to beat up the people that are trying to stop you from building. The Bayes question about, what is kind of the Christian response to transhumanism? Where do Christians draw the line in light of the fact that, we wear glasses, we have pacemakers, etc.? Aren't these things transforming what it means to be human and transforming the image of God? And I think that Christianity does provide some pretty clear-cut responses to that. Obviously, the responses a non-Christian might not agree with, but just by way of some explanation, there's definitely some very specific parts of our createdness and what it means to bear the image of God that are ordained as positive goods in the Bible and in Christian tradition, Christian philosophy. And a lot of those goods are things that traditionally self-identifying transhumanists have kind of looked askance at or wanted to do away with. And just the main one that I'll highlight is biological sex. So Christianity has always had this very exalted view of biological sex. Of course, Christianity, the whole notion of the Trinity, really, if you could summarize it in one sentence, is that God is first and foremost relational and interpersonal. In fact, God himself is this relationship of different persons with different roles, and the different persons kind of have different strengths. And there's a lot of stuff in especially the New Testament about God, when he created humanity, created two biological sexes to embody this interrelational nature of fundamental reality. So Ephesians 5, male and female represent Christ and the church. 1 Corinthians 11 actually just comes right out and says that the relationship between men and women is kind of like the Trinity. So this is a positive good that God ordained, and he created this reality to teach us something about him and his design. And transhumanists, I think, can kind of have a Mott and Bailey problem on this, because you read you go to a transhumanist website and you go to the What is Transhumanism section, and it'll say, we just believe in using technology to maximize human well-being and human capabilities. And you think, well, that's good. All Christians agree with that. But then you read, basically any transhumanist thinker. You go look at Vitalik, for example, and Vitalik wants to abolish pregnancy, just have all babies grown externally in sort of vats. Blair Ostler, to take a lesser known transhumanist, wants to kind of use transhumanism to carry forth this Andrea Dworkin sort of critique of the existence of biological sex. Andrea Dworkin, the feminist, thought the mere existence of biological sex is oppressive. It kind of imprisons women in their biology because they're weaker, they're vulnerable. We've got to get rid of this biological sex thing. And Blair Ostler, the transhumanist philosopher, says, great, let's abolish sex, no more male and female, create 10 new sexes, let's make sex totally fluid, let people change their sex at will. So, again, it's a Mott and Bailey in that when you get the one sentence definition, it sounds unobjectionable. But so much of the time, people who self-identify as transhumanist in particular will end up denying core parts of what Christian theology says about, having the image of God and being human. So there are some clear lines there.
So I have a question, that would seem to preclude, for example, like if so you mentioned that one of the lines would be around sort of gender, biological sex. So that would seem to preclude, like, if we were to able to sort of technologically sort out how to be substrate independent and like sort of move our minds into, like, right, you can live in a computer, you could live your life out as a Tesla driving around town, you know, just like whatever, you know, you could imagine something like that perhaps. Like, is that would be something that's not okay in your view?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, I'm not affirming this, but just as a hypothetical, if the simulation hypothesis is true, we exist within a substrate, a computer substrate, and biological sex exists. You know, I'd kind of go with the David Chalmers view that stuff that exists in a computer substrate is real. So if you've got biological sex in a computer substrate, I think it is biological sex.
Okay, so then that's like a pretty specific claim. That's actually quite interesting. I've never heard anyone claim that.
Yeah, I just think the Bible and Christian history are just pretty clear cut on this point.
Yeah. I actually, if you guys don't mind, I have two questions, and I would love to like just get some thoughts about them. I actually have to go in just about 20 minutes or so. And so I was just hoping to put these questions forward and maybe just get some thoughts. Something that
go ahead. Yeah.
Something that confuses me in general about existence is this classic problem which Christian thinkers have written about, and non-Christian thinkers have written about, and many people have thought about this problem, but so right, like a lot of people are a bit obsessed with this notion of like, are we in a simulation or not? And I've talked about this before. I think this is not actually that interesting of a question. I think like the answer to that question, like if I tell you the answer is no, like what does that even mean, first of all? Like it doesn't really, right? Like if we had an oracle for the problem of answering, we would just be like, okay, what does that mean? But if you said yes, well, like right now you have this problem of like, you've just kind of passed the buck. So it's like, we know we're inside a simulation. That means like there's some kind of stuff, some hardware that we're running on somewhere, out there. And, like let's assume that we can like break into that, you immediately kind of recover this classic, problem of the regress, right? And I kind of wonder like how you guys think about this problem, because to me it seems like almost like logically very difficult to answer, like just at sort of a foundational level. So like it seems to me that like the Christian answer would be like, yeah, regress as long as you want, but like finitely many times. Maybe it's this universe is not a simulation. Maybe that's the case. Maybe there's 2, maybe there's 20, maybe there's like 10 to 120. But eventually you'll find that sort of first mover, which would be the Christian God. Is that correct? And what is it that substantiates that for you? Like where does that feeling like that tracks comes from?
So if I could answer that one, Connor, do you mind?
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
Yeah, I think what's always interesting, and I've been kind of thinking about this question since Elon kind of popularized it pretty early on, which was, maybe we are all living in this computer simulation because actually I think it's interesting. The original reason that I think he said that was because of evolution. He looked at sort of the evolutionary odds of us being where we are, sort of in the total matter space.
The Bostrom argument is that
right.
Basically, you can imagine in our current far future, there will be many, many civilizations, or, many, many computers where there will be simulations of beings. Right. And so if you think about like the measure over those that corresponds to simulations versus non-simulations, is like very small % are in the base reality. And so why wouldn't that be the case for us now? It's like,
exactly. So, and this is actually one of my problems with evolution as I don't think that it's empirical. I don't think that evolution is empirical, even though it kind of looks that way from how we practice it. But I think it's actually sort of it takes the sort of like matter space and applies probability to it and says, here's the recursive argument for reality. And I'm not compelled by it, but I think that the Christian answer here is sort of yes. Like, yes, it is a simulation in the sense that there's actually a philosopher named Berkeley who kind of said this, but the hardware, if you will, is just the word of God. So in scripture, it says that God spoke and there was light. And this is sort of this is like the simulation substrate, if you will, is like God's ever present speaking and words. And so I guess if you want to translate that to the terms that you originally put out, it's like, no, it's sort of like yes, but there's only one regression, if that makes sense. And in theory, sure, you could say like, oh, well, God, like, is speaking it in a world in which he's then again speaking it. So like, I guess in theory you could regress, but meaningfully there's only one like core regression, and it's like God's continuous, extant will. And then that also, I think, kind of aligns the probability problem as well, because I think that the physical world we're in is arbitrary if you look at it within the picture of the simulation, but then it's actually completely intentional if you're looking at it from from God's frame, if that makes sense.
Okay, and I think we want to keep on staying on this topic because Basil only has so much time. I will just say that we had a conversation with Frank Tiplo, I said recently on a podcast, and his response to the simulation question, which I think is probably shared by a lot of people here, but it's kind of a nonsense question, exactly like you were saying. The real question is, okay, then who's the simulator, and how complex is the simulation? I do want to just pop over to Jeremy real quick because he said he has a very critical point and he has to drop off. So if you want to make your point, and then hopefully it's in line with this convo, we'll get back to it.
Yeah. So great to see everybody here, and thanks for having me on. There is a point that relates to this topic, but I want to just introduce something real quick. The context, real brief on my background. I've been building technology companies for a while now, mostly in the Bitcoin and security space, a non-custodial platform, and then I led all the products at Kraken Exchange for a number of years. But I'm here because, prior to that, and one thing that enabled me to even see how Bitcoin could grow was that I did spend a number of years down the rabbit hole with Nick Land. I got an opportunity to listen to him and ask some questions and learn from him direct, and it was really deep down the acceleration hole. And, in the last few years, I've actually had a conversion that brought me what I would say to the opposite side, and would perhaps put me, going from kind of base camp to something that's different. And the problem that I want to introduce is just the notion of the approach to technology, the approach to the world, and specifically a kind of more Marian view or a view of how Mary approached, God, versus what I would position as more of a kind of Promethean view of technology. And my phone might be freezing up. It's been kind of going in and out. So just tell me if you can't hear me for some reason. And that basically says, and I think in the accelerationist view of things, that there is a little bit of a Promethean approach to this, where I think that the Christian, the Christian view and kind of how God commands us is more towards this view of God is in control, God is in charge. He does give us brains to go solve problems. But there is this notion of not, tasting from the tree, right? And so there is this, it's not so much full restraint as there is a level of caution. Now you go to something like the parable of, the tenants or the parable of the talents, excuse me. And of course, in the parable of the talents, the servant that does not invest the resources that they've been given is actually the one that is kind of given the most flack by the master, by the owner. And so there is this view of like going full safetyism is also not the answer. But I just want to ask Bays how he would approach something like this, this question of Prometheanism, versus a view, more of God being in control and us taking a view more towards technology of revelation more than just pure human, rational driven, kind of Promethean steal fire from the gods?
I would love to answer the question, but I think it's slightly like terminology laden, and I'm not super tracking what you mean. I don't know if you want to try to like rephrase it. Maybe that would help me.
Jeremy, could you hear Basil?
Pardon?
I'm asking Jeremy if he could hear you. He's not responding.
Yeah.
Okay, if you're having a problem with your mic, Jeremy, just pop off and pop back on. We'll get you to rephrase. Was there anything there you could respond to, Base, or should we move on?
I would love to just get just a rephrase of that question before I try to answer it, because I do think I just didn't quite understand what he meant.
Okay.
I do
All
have
right.
like
No, that's fair.
I'm really glad to see Intelligiata is here. Hi, it's been a while. Hope you're doing well. Yeah, I have just like one more question before I head off, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I think like one thing I kind of wonder about here, and in this conversation I've heard like pieces of this, which is like there's like right, so it's like things in Christianity will like the and the like interpretation of it and the way that it manifests its beliefs and opinions about the world, like we'll say like, all right, like these certain kinds of outcomes are not good outcomes in the world, and like I think Christians would want to not have those things happen, right? And the thing that I am getting some sense of, I think right now, that I do think kind of like differentiates a little bit, is just like the amount of variance that's like maybe like acceptable or considered like tolerable or okay or even ideal. And so to me, like I guess my kind of high level heuristic is that, you know, a lot more variance is probably good. It increases like the robustness of this thing that we have of life and its, you know, continued existence in the universe. And so when I think about like constraining it in various ways, I think like it seems like I'm not arguing that any particular thing is this way, but it seems that you could have sort of a fragilizing effect, right? And this is sort of like the same argument that I would make about, you know, the way like overregulation of AI or something like this, right? Where it's like you have a policy that you set at a certain time step with a certain amount of information, with a certain amount of constraints, and the number of, you know, like the number of constraints just kind of overwhelms the sorts of policies and the fitness of the policies that you can put forward. And then you end up sort of with outcomes that are generally like worse for the overall kind of organism of civilization. And I think the thing that I really want to ask, like sincerely, is just like, what is the world? Because it seems to me that we are already in a world that has many features that, you know, I mean, I think all of us don't like, but in this context, Christians wouldn't like and don't think are good. And I think like, what is the like response to like, I guess what my claim would be that like we probably will live in a world where many things are like not to spec. Like what is the way to move forward in that world? Like I think, right. So like, I mean, there will probably continue to be other religions. They will probably have like fundamental disagreements. I mean, I know even within sects of Christianity, there will be disagreements. I think this will ultimately, I mean, manifest maybe in like very radically different subcomponents of civilization, right? And so what is the way that, you know, what is the Christian response to that? Is it to, you know, like, is it just whatever, you know, it's up to the individual, it's up to the group? How do you guys think about that?
So I think the general question base was like, is variance good? If I could like really, really simplify it down, or maybe not.
Maybe I'll simplify it a little bit more. Let me just say this. It seems likely to me that things that at least some Christians don't like will happen. And I'm curious like how you think about what to do in that case. Because yeah, again, it does seem likely. And I think yeah. And then if you want to mix in something about variance in general, that'd be good.
Yeah. So first off, I would say, like, on the point of variance, there's no such thing as variance without constraints. Being able to even define variance at all, like, I think includes some sort of concept of constraint, even just like in a directional sense. So, obviously we don't want to be variance maximizers. But beyond that, of course, there is a ton of valued variance against fragility and all sorts of things, even just sort of motion. That said, like, your general question of what does Christianity do with variance, which you would call, and actually let me back up and say, like, two types of variance. One is a type of variance where you simply don't understand it, and then another is where you, like, know it's bad. And by bad in the Christian frame, we mean, like, pretty explicitly what God does not enjoy or does not find pleasing. And that sounds like sort of a flippant definition until you kind of think about God as sort of the author of all things, and that in this sort of, like, authored reality that he's writing, there are things that displease him and don't displease him, and that's sort of the grounding of Christian morality. So I would say, as far as what are those things, like, what do we do with those sort of bad variances? I mean, the general Christian program is that the world be saved, be reshaped in the image of the things that are good via primarily the gospel. There is obviously a political component to Christianity wherever it is, but I don't think that this is sort of we will allow, absolutely no civilizational level variance within that, do not align with one very strict orthodoxy, mostly just because the, like, primary component of Christianity isn't political. It's about belief. And so not that there's no political component, but that's not the primary component. So that's what I'd say.
It's definitely not the primary component, and I think I'm going to throw it to John Stokes to respond since he has his hand up as well. But I also want to just make the point that one of the fundamental claims of Christianity is that, to use simulation theory, there is a simulator, and he's running a simulation with a predefined endpoint. And I'm also curious if you could respond to the question of if EAC, or your concept of EAC, borrows any language from specifically Teilhard de Chardin, Frank Tipler, Physics of Immortality, Omega Point. But ultimately,
no, but
mm-hmm.
From cosmism, there is some connection to cosmism.
Perfect.
But
I
would say,
again,
by the way,
yeah, go ahead.
I am going to leave in about 10 minutes, but Intelligiata has been around the EAC scene, since the beginning. She knows as much as I do about it. So,
Perfect.
Yeah,
we'll bring it on.
And she is Christian. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I can throw it to John to respond to you as well, unless you had something else there, Base.
No, I'd love to hear from John.
Okay, yeah, let's throw it to John.
Yeah, I guess the question, like, it was just too abstract for me, so I would ask, like, what are some examples? Like, what's an example of a thing that Christians, one would imagine Christians don't like, that seems likely to happen? Something that's concrete.
Yeah, I think we already kind of hit on, like, the annoyingly, like, hot button sort of thing of like this biological sex stuff around exowombs. Maybe it's certain variations of substrate independent consciousness or existence. Maybe it's practicing other religions. I don't know. I don't have, like, a great compass for what these kinds of, where these kinds of lines might be, because I don't really have a great model of what kinds of things, are considered, like, I guess, sinful or not in line with Christianity. But yeah, those are just some guesses. If we look around society, there's a lot of variance in where people sort of draw this boundary over time and over space. So I think. Yeah,
I do have a couple quick points that I think will answer your question, Base. But go ahead, John, if you want to kick in first.
Yeah, I guess I just I think it's interesting. It's kind of deep. Like, I think about this stuff myself as a person of faith, because then I'm like, what would be a thing that would happen that I'd be like, okay, wow, man, I guess I was wrong. I guess I've been wasting my time on Sundays. Is that or like, what would that look like? I don't know that artificial wombs or consciousness being on a different substrate would qualify, because I sort of expect that my consciousness will be on a different substrate at some point when my biological flesh passes away. And the womb thing is like, I feel like we've already kind of crossed that Rubicon with like surrogacy and stuff like this. So there's not that much of a difference for me theoretically between like, oh, we rented a womb briefly versus like there's a one in a vat somewhere.
I've got a pretty easy one, John, that I can throw out.
Sure.
So I think that probably the most extreme case that would answer your question, Baze, is the death of God. And I would position that Nietzsche and the death of God itself couldn't have happened and in a peaceful way to where we could have peaceful atheists out and about and doing their work and science and the spread of science if there had not as a precursor been the peace of Christ. And it's only through Christ and through the awareness of the victim. Rene Girard, if you haven't read any Rene Girard, does a great job of explaining the details of this. But all the work of science, including many innovations that we don't, Christians maybe would not support or subscribe to or use themselves, and many discussions and many positions and worldviews and lifestyles. All of these things can emerge and be in a peaceful community because of the revelation of Christ. And so I think that the very existence of new things is dependent on Christ. And I apologize if earlier for some reason my mic was going in and out, and I actually did not hear your response. But I appreciate you jumping on and answering questions. And I do have to jump here in a minute.
Let me also just say to Baze that I think I think Jeremy, you raised a good point about the death of God stuff, and like it's true. It's like if Christianity went the way of the Greek religions, like that would be a thing, but then I'm not going to be around to see that. And so then I think about or probably not going to be around to see that, but then I think what would be something in my lifetime that would happen. But I spent like 5 years at divinity school, and then I went and did a PhD at Chicago in this, and I've seen a lot of people have crises of faith. It happens a lot, especially now. I did not come out of a fundamentalist background. Like I said, I'm Pentecostal. We were not fundamentalist Pentecostals or biblical literalists. That's more of a Baptist thing, although many Pentecostals now I think are probably fundamentalists. So I've seen a lot of fundies show up at div school and realize that Paul did not write Ephesians. He certainly didn't write Hebrews, and then they just it's all out the window. They leave their wife, they dye their hair blonde, just the whole 9 yards, right? And so this thing of what if I encountered something that, or just to give another example, there are Christians who believe that the age of miracles is over, and the miraculous was confined to Acts and the time of the New Testament, and that people don't get healed anymore. And then they go to some church, some evangelical church, and somebody gets healed of something, and they see it, and they're like, okay, well now I was wrong, and I have to convert to this other sect of Christianity. So my point being that this happens within Christianity, where people are like, I was raised in a particular tradition, and now I have this ontological shock, and I realize that we were wrong about this thing, and now I'm going to convert to this other thing. Or they were raised in something, and then they go to school and they find that the thing that they were raised in, it's sort of ontologically, or it's untenable in light of what they know, what they can read. And so this is a common thing that happens in the faith, and Christians are pretty good about adapting for the most part. Christianity is pretty adaptive. And so my expectation would be that whatever happens with, artificial wombs or faster than light travel or whatever, there'll be some version of Christianity that incorporates that, and people are able to kind of accept it and incorporate it into their faith and move on. And I think it comes down to just the idea that there is like an actual, like a super agent, sovereign, that we're in some kind of relationship with. And I think if you can accept that, then a lot of other things are maybe flexible, and you can adapt as long as you have this like relationship with this this entity, this like super powerful entity through this community. And that's maybe my kind of Pentecostal mysticism talking. But I expect that it would probably go that way. I don't know if that is a helpful
Base
answer
does
to your
say you have to
question, Base.
drop off,
Yeah,
so I don't know if you wanted
yeah.
to make some final points here, Base, before you leave.
Yeah, I have a few more minutes now. So, no, that's interesting. I mean, I think like,
If you do have some
you
time,
need,
Base, could you
yeah,
respond also? Because I'm also confused, like John was, what the thrust of your question is, because you would also agree that there are less than desirable outcomes. And so how do we all respond to that?
that's what,
Obviously, we want to work towards the best future. And I will just say that again, Christian cosmology is essentially that, we win. So we're not really ultimately concerned with the ultimate future. It's just, how soon can we get there, and, how much, net good can we bring into the world in the process. But go ahead.
yeah, no, just in response to what John said, like, I think, yeah, I think, yeah, my view is that, right, like if indeed it is adaptive, then it may find willing hosts over time, and that is probably that is the way to survive, right? There are no willing hosts for Greek myths in some sense, right? It's like these things are there, but they're kind of a curiosity, and I think like it may be the case that people took them rather seriously at some point in the past. I think. No, I mean, I think it does matter, right? If you have belief in something and you want to assure its continuation, you have to look at the actual landscape that you're in. And I think that it probably will require like, adaptation, of some kind, right? I do think there will be, just radical changes to civilization over the next like 100 years or something, and may challenge a lot of people. That's why I asked the question. Just curious how people think about this.
Appreciate it. Did you have some final response there, John? I see you're still unmuted.
No, I
Okay.
think look, this is the stuff I think about as well. Again, that's why I asked for specifics, because I guess not that I didn't understand the question, but more like I wanted to know what specific things you were thinking of. This is a really common Christian thing to see people sort of like leave because they got their world rocked by some particular, like they were a young earth creationist and they finally saw some dinosaur bones and they're like, holy crap, it's definitely over 6,000 years old. Like I'm out, like I'm done, So this happens, and you either find a way to incorporate the new thing into, what you already thought, or, you exit. So.
Yeah.
That's true. And, another aspect too, I appreciated engaging with Meg's IO, and I don't know how central she is. I imagine that you've engaged with her account to some extent. She's in the space. But, I shared a tweet of hers about, the future belongs to those who give the next generation reason for hope. And that was a Teilhard, Chardin quote. And I think that really fundamentally is what Christians are, advocating for, is that Christianity is what is going to give the next generation hope, and what gives all of humanity hope. So again, like our cosmology is just that Christianity is going to go to 100, is going to approach infinity, through time. And so we're working towards that future, just that inevitable future. And to some extent, I feel like the compatibility with EAC is that you guys also express some sort of cosmological belief that we are approaching, infinity of human knowledge and human tech development?
Yeah, I think so. I think that, yeah, there's like a lot of temptation, just vibes temptation around like the discussion of any kind of telos. I think it's a complex question, and I think, my baseline thing is universe is a computer. There are a lot of like trajectories of programs that can run on it. And, I would say, I don't know, like, I mean, there are some bounds on this, but like the space of final states is probably pretty big, and it's unclear that final state is defined,
So would you
well, at
say
all.
maybe you're not like, you're not as much of a tech optimist as maybe some of us on the stage? You don't think that it's an inevitable consequence?
Yeah, I think it's ill defined, like what we're even saying at this moment.
No, that's fair. I'm not trying to get a gotcha. I'm just curious because
I know you're just memeing, but,
no,
yeah,
no, no.
no, I think like it is just, it gets into like, yeah, I
Yeah,
think we would just need to be quite specific about what we're saying. So
that's
if
fair.
you're saying that like there is a point where the universe like stops or something, and, yeah, like I don't know, like this is like the Tipler thing, like I don't know, it's
Hmm.
quite a weird theory, and I think it's been fairly like, you know, like admonished, but, yeah, like there are certainly like,
Well, it's
trends
not a
in the way.
meme if I can just express, I mean, whatever Tipler's specific theory is, sure. But, the Christianity, it's not a meme that we do believe ultimately that, there is an endpoint, a defined endpoint prophetically, where we are reaching towards, and the arc of time is pointing towards. So
Okay,
that's not a
what
meme.
is
That's
that?
just our belief.
What is that? How do you think about that as like a thing? Like what
I
is
mean,
that?
it's broad, but, it's the Christian religion. It's the concept of all of humanity unifying, in one, the mystical body of the church, of the bride of Christ. I mean, that's just religiously, that is what, Christianity professes. And it's professing that that future is inevitable, de- developed, designed by the simulated, uh, in this simulation that we're living in. And that's, I mean, that's fundamentally what Christianity is. And so that thought to me is what aligns it with elements of what EAC is quote unquote memeing,
Yeah,
but we're
what do you
taking
think
very
about the
seriously.
Turing? There is a Turing quote about this, right? Like, what do you think about that? Do you know
I'm
the one I'm
actually
talking
not
about?
sure exactly what you're referring
It's
to.
like,
Can you please?
yeah, John, do you know what I'm talking about? It's like, science is a differential equation, religion is a boundary condition.
Zach, do you know
No, I'm
what,
not familiar
this
with
quote?
that. Yeah,
Anybody here?
no.
No, sorry, I'm not familiar.
Okay.
I'm not familiar with that specific quote. No.
I'm sorry. I wish we would. It's interesting. If you find it and you can share it,
No,
maybe we
that's
can
the
engage
quote.
after the space.
That's the
Say again?
quote. That I just gave the quote.
Can you repeat it? I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, yeah. Science is a differential equation. Religion is a boundary condition.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, I think I know what you're trying to say. If I can hop in here real quick.
Yeah, you've had your hand up forever.
Yeah, man, my hand is hurting, Connor. You had me with my hand up like for a whole hour. But no, I'm just playing with you. So I would say to a certain degree, religion is a boundary condition to the differential equation of what science is, only in the fact that humanity in of itself is broken. We naturally are propense to want to sin against one another. Most of the technologies that we have today are kind of evidence of that. We can look at it like with the light bulb, right? Initially, it was created to be able to burn for much longer than what it is now, but because of the idea of profits, it had to have a shortened lifespan. Whereas the idea of Christianity is that of building everything prefaced by love to be able to give life to others, but that is not that profitable. We could look at like the idea of economy as well, right? Like the economy is structured in a way that only a select few are really profitable at the end of the day. And the more you know how to play the game, the more profitable you become. Whereas the way that the kingdom of God functions in an economy is one in which everybody is profitable, and it could be argued whether that is communistic or socialistic to a certain degree. And so right now, humanity kind of does need those boundaries to a certain degree, which is why, like, even like biblically, we have the idea of law given.
the idea that God gave us 10 commandments is because humanity without a law is pretty much lawless. Without us knowing what is right from wrong, we will go into two extremes, which is what I think one guy here, Just a Pen earlier, he was here, he said earlier about humanity at one point did have like a boundless existence at one point, and what they did with that is created the Tower of Babel. And even in scriptures, God says unless God came down and put like a restriction on them, in that case, he came to confuse their languages so that they wouldn't be able to communicate with one another. It says that they would be able to do whatever they purpose in their hearts. Now, he didn't do that because obviously he doesn't love humanity. He doesn't want us to advance. The whole goal with the Tower of Babel was so that mankind could try and exalt themselves above God and try and dethrone God from his position. And that in itself is destructive to mankind because we are not wise enough to actually like lead ourselves without the guidance of God himself. I mean, evidence of that is the fact that we disobeyed an initial commandment of just not eating from one tree. It was just a simple commandment from just don't eat from it and you won't die. But, you know, we choose to eat from it because we are propense to want to disobey to a certain degree because of our curiosity. It's part of having free will, right? And so then religion to a certain degree is that boundary to when we think about science. And I guess that's where I would say I differ to a certain degree to some of the other believers here on the panel, because I do believe that, for example, even though I am a futurist to a certain degree, I will stop at technological advancement till the point that it goes into your brain or in your right hand, only because prophetically speaking, that's when we get into what we would call like a beast system, but that's a whole different conversation. But we could have that if we want to open that. But I hope that kind of answers that
I'd
quote
be
to a certain
curious
degree.
what you think. So people already have, you know, like for example, people with Parkinson's. It's rather common now. I think there's like probably on the order of millions installed in people's brains. Deep brain stimulators in the basal ganglia and other parts of the deep brain to improve people's Parkinson's.
Sure.
Would this be considered not allowed?
Well, that would be where we would consider like the motive as to the why. So we could say the same thing with like drugs, right? Pharmaceuticals. The word pharmacy comes from a Greek word pharmakeia, which translates into sorcery. So one could say, oh, any kind of pharmaceutical is a sorcery, but there are people who would need an opiate for a post-op surgery, right? There are people who I've seen use cannabis who have Parkinson's disease, who it actually does help them out. When we're talking about like what you just said, I think the thin line is in who is the one administering the chip inside of your forehead, for example. Because there is an eschatological view where there is a figure in the future who arises eventually, who we call the Antichrist, who eventually wants people to get either a chip in their hand or in their forehead as a sign of allegiance to him personally. But in this case, what you're talking about, we're talking about like a medical good for somebody for them to be able to function normally. Like I would say people could probably get like a technological arm, sorry, installed on them if it's what they need, you know, because if they don't have another arm, then I guess you could say a robotic arm is good. So in that sense, it wouldn't be a bad thing for them to be able to do that. Does that answer your question?
That answers that question. Yeah, no, I think that's great. And
Well,
I'd
and
be
one more
curious,
thing
like,
too here based is obviously there's going to be an amount of personal interpretation too when it
of
comes to some of
course.
these things. So
Yeah,
this
no,
isn't
I
shared
think
by
of
all
this as
Christians
a
here.
family. I mean, to be quite honest, like just to be very transparent, my model of Christianity is that it's a family of related beliefs, like most things that have a single label, which
Hmm.
would include it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very much true base. There's obviously a lot of like intramural stuff here. Unfortunately, the intramural stuff does actually have a lot of effect on this question, like whether or not you think that the prophecies in Revelation are about 70 AD or are about some point in the future does end up, I think, determining a lot about what you think about this question. But I wanted to just quickly address your quote. I have to reset my phone about science is a differential equation, religion is a boundary condition. I think if I understood you correctly, you were sort of applying that to this like historical endpoint thing. And I just wanted to say like, yes, but that's not just a historical thing. It's not just defining historical start and end points. It's actually deeper than that. Like, and my son is running around, by the way. Sorry if it's a little hard to hear. But it's also sort of integrated throughout. It's a boundary condition. In fact, I would turn it around and say it's sort of like religion is the question. It's the question being asked in the sense that it's there is a sort of a grand question being asked, and like, yes, science is is sort of a differential. It's describing the curve of reality, but it's all answering that fundamental question. And I think that question is really, what is the nature of God? And all of this sort of physical matter and what is playing out in real time is sort of an answer to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like a very open flavor of this, right? And I think, like, I mean, I would almost say, like, we could, like, my intuition here is that we could, like, probably permute, like, labels across it, and it would look very similar, like, sort of functionally internal to itself.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But then you have to ask the question, like, could you do that? Could you permute it? And can you put labels across some theoretical space? And the answer is like, yes. But also there is one particular permutation that we're in. And I want to like very much like contrast the fact that yes, it looks arbitrary, with it, like we spoke of before, but actually it's not. Like, it is arbitrary considered inside the simulation, if you will. It's permutational, but then like step out of that frame and it's not. And that's sort of like a fundamental, well, it's a characteristic of any transcendent system of beliefs.
At some level, right? Like, this is the kind of fundamental thing, right? Like, right, we're thinking about, you know, the boundary, maybe the boundary conditions of like the universe we can observe, right? But like, it may be that there's other stuff going on that eventually we could observe, right? And like,
Yeah.
the range of things that are like, you know, imaginable universes, computable universes, like stable universes,
Sure.
is pretty broad.
Well, and that
And those may all
you're
have
including
very different, you know, so the thing about the Turing quote, right, is like, the boundary conditions will give like the conditions under which like the initial conditions, and you will have an evolution given, you know, this sort of differential equation. And I think like I think a lot of Christians would disagree with that. My understanding would be like, yeah, no, like the hand of God actually matters. There's stuff outside of science that would steer the universe, you know, inside of the time evolution in a certain direction that would sort of violate like quote science or something. I think other Christians might say that actually there's a compatibilist view with science where it's like, no, if you observe some kind of events, then we can capture, you know, an understanding of it with science. You know, I don't know. I think it's a bit fuzzy, but yeah, I take your point.
And actually, I'd love to hear Intelligiata, is that how you pronounce that? She's had her hand up for a little while, and it sounds like you're early EAC and Christian. I'd love to hear you chime in on this.
Intelligiata is awesome.
Hey guys, hey Baze, it's great to talk to you. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been so long. What's up?
No, I'm really happy that this discussion's happening. I think it's an important one. I can speak from having been involved for a long time with EAC and also having been a Christian my whole life. And I hope that, you know, my views are helpful to people. It's one view of many views. One thing that I'd like to say just about humanity in general is, there's just something about our nature that aspires to transcendence. And it's something deeply rooted within us, regardless of our background or our faith or, you know, any belief system we have. And that's actually been one of the great things for me about EAC is it has attracted people from all walks of life, coming from many different threads, to come together around one goal, which is building a better future. And this is something that is very powerful. It's part of our nature. And I think it's been really nice to be able to gather around that goal with people, regardless if they're Christian or whatever they are, because it's a really important part of what it is to be human. Now, if I take that from a Christian perspective, and I say this a lot on my account, but you know, Christians and people who believe in God and believe that God created humanity believe that humanity was created for greatness. And that comes from being created in God's image. And part of this creation that, you know, we were given, you know, we were asked to be fruitful and multiply. And in many ways for me, this more, you know, this view that's come out in a lot of ways around it's time to build or just build is very much in the same vein. We were created and called to do something great with what we were given. And I think many people, you know, within that call to transcendence feel that deep within themselves. And, one of the key things for me that's really important about EAC today in 2024 or 2023, basically our current age, is something about our current culture, which is actually extremely old. It comes from the beginning. And this is going to be a little bit of, very ancient history, going all the way back to when God created humanity. So we had all the angels, who are these supremely intelligent beings without bodies. They're just spirit. And one of the most special ones of them was Lucifer. And he was really offended at the idea that God could possibly love such beings as humans who didn't, have the same level of intelligence as the angels. And he rebuked God at the idea that he could love humanity the same as the angels. And in return, God thrust Lucifer into hell, and that's why we have Satan. But the key thing is this, that, Lucifer really despises humans. He doesn't want us to succeed. He doesn't want us to exist. And if you think about it from a Christian perspective, we live in a fallen world. And he's always been trying to trick us into thinking that we can never attain greatness. We are not great. We were not created for greatness. And somehow this view became really pervasive in our modern culture. And, we like to call it doomerism or decel thinking, but this idea that we don't belong on earth or we don't have the right to do wonderful things with our lives. And I love EAC for this because it's an extremely broad approach to negate this view and to bring back the idea that the future is ours for the taking. We can build it as great as we want it to be. We just have to believe it's possible. And whether you come from a Christian perspective or any perspective, this is a deeply human call to transcendence that we all have and we can all share in together. And I think it's very powerful and extremely positive, and I really am grateful for the opportunity to be a part of it.
Bro, I told you she was based. Also, I feel like you've been waiting 2 years to say that, and you just said it perfectly. Thank you.
Yeah, that rocked. That was sick.
That was a beautiful statement. And to go off that to that expression of the image of God, the Imago Dei, which I've been posting about a couple of times, is so central to Christianity, that we are made in the image of God and that we are aspiring to greatness, to image God. And that's just fundamentally built into Christianity. And I think that's something with not only the EAC space, but really our entire space here in just the conversation we engage in daily is just so saturated with the framework of Christianity. The language, it's everywhere around us. It's definitely been one of the spark notes for the development of the modern age. And I think that's just something that we have to engage with. And then also with Ontologia, with your expression about whether we can work with other people in the space in EAC that are not Christian. I think that was another fundamental reason I wanted to host this space, because some people have said to me, okay, well, let's fork it. Let's do, cross ACK or Christians ACK. I really don't like the ideas of iterative derivatives. I would rather just keep the message very basic so that we can all work together. And I do think we can work with non-Christians, as long as they're not opposed to ultimately our vision of the future. Then why not? Let's work together. So I do appreciate, I appreciate the diverse conversation. Zack, you have your hand up, and you have, I know, a lot of things to add about specifically teleology around the image of God, if you want to comment.
I really kind of hesitate to add anything after that, though. That was sick. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of, the thing I bring to this conversation, right, is I'm fundamentally not a technical thinker or builder, but I have, grown up in Christianity, and I continue to, I'm serving.
Sorry, Zack,
Yeah.
is there something with your mics? It's super reverby.
So let me try and turn this. Well, is this better? Oh my gosh.
That's a lot better. Go ahead.
I just assumed he was in a
I just
cathedral.
absolutely.
I honestly assume so. I hopping right out of the living room.
I managed to.
Yeah, it was actually kind of
awesome.
awesome.
The whole thing is great. So I currently am a full-time, servant at our church. I'll probably be ordained here in the next year or so, and so this is the place that I approach all this from, right, is this idea of looking at scripture and seeing exactly what Intelligence is saying, that there's a dual-sided nature to people, according to, if you believe in the Christian metaphysic, and I think I said the other day on this topic, I'm a Christian metaphysical extremist. Like, I approach this as this, if this is true, then this has to orient my entire life and ought to completely reshape my approach to reality, right? And so, because as Christians, it's revealed to us that we have a dual nature as humans. We're made in the image of God, and yet we're fundamentally broken. And we're constantly, there's this tension. We want to go on either side. So there's been whole generations of Christianity even that have wanted to over-focus on this image of God, and they neglect the idea that we're fundamentally broken, which is not good. We can't neglect that. That's the reason we have scripture and we have salvation, is we must be fixed in some way to enable us to be in God's presence. We cannot be in God's presence as broken, sinful beings. But I see, and this is kind of the thing that I can speak to and want to encourage, especially those of us who are believers who are encountering these ideas. I see this struggle that we have now where we've gone too far on this other side, where as Christians, we are over-focused on the idea of the brokenness and depravity of humanity, which is true. It's fundamentally true. But we focus on that to the extent that we neglect an important doctrine in Scripture, which is the doctrine of glorification. And the doctrine of glorification says that we will be made like God. The ultimate end point of humanity, those who are willing to accept God's conditions for being made like God, is that we will see God as he is, that our fundamental natures will be changed, that we will become something that we don't know what it will be. It will be, you talked about translating us to a different substrate. Like, yeah, in a sense, I do believe that. I'm expecting to be written to a different substrate as a being. And not only that, but I believe that my existence on the planet is training for that. And if that's true, then I have a huge responsibility as a Christian. But I'm claiming that I know the end point of history. I'm claiming that I understand how reality is going to be rewritten. I'm claiming that I serve, the author of the simulation. I'm saying all that, and yet I'm sitting here and I'm saying, yeah, but I shouldn't work hard at remaking the earth in his image. I shouldn't work hard at righting wrongs. I shouldn't, no, that's for someone else. It doesn't really matter what your perspective on, eschatology, and I'm sure some of you guys have already discussed this in the space. I'm sorry I missed all that. It doesn't really matter what your perspective on that is, but you can't neglect that responsibility that you have as a Christian. You can't come to the world and say, well, this much technology is good. The technology that my dad had is fine. There's nothing the matter with changing the world by inscribing information onto silicon, but I don't accept that we can do AI because that's somehow different. Now, I'm not advocating that we don't wisely and thoughtfully, and I do believe, even as a Christian who is into the idea of acceleration, I do believe that there are directions we could accelerate that are dangerous and foolish and even sinful for us. But we can't get away from this idea that God has placed us. And I think, Connor, you brought this up perfectly. In the beginning of Genesis, we were placed in a perfection state, and God says, go forth and take dominion, rule the earth and subdue it. Meaning that even in a state of perfection, there were parts of the earth that were unsubdued, that needed to be subdued. That's the initial call of humanity from God. And so, to me, I just keep seeing this idea come up over and over. I believe as Christians, we really cannot afford to stand on the sidelines and point at technology or uses of technology and say, that's wrong, and have no answer to how we would order it according to a Christian metaphysic. If you want to say that, and I agree that there are certain ways to say that technology shouldn't be used. That's great. Demonstrate how, according to God, according to a Christian ethic and a Christian metaphysic, you should order the world with technology. Because if you don't choose to do that, you can't look at other human beings who are doing that and say, well, you're wrong for trying. They're trying to act out of what they know to reshape the world in the image that they believe to be good. And they should be applauded for that, because at least they're doing something. And too many times the church has sat on the sidelines and said it's wrong for us to take up that mantle because we're depraved. And the answer is like, yeah, if that's true, but you're claiming to know God, you're claiming to be remade in his image, you're claiming to have the Holy Spirit. You say you speak to God. Has God not told you anything about how he wants this world to be? Does he have no opinions about how we should use our tools to reshape things? And I would just argue that he does. And again, this always comes back to this idea that aggressive optimism is like scripturally mandated. Like hope and, these things are not like options for us. We are required, we are commanded to have a hopeful outlook because we literally know the end of things. I know this sounds like a meme, but I say to people who don't believe the way I do all the time, you don't understand, like, I'm not planning around ending cataclysms because I know what the world-ending cataclysm is going to be. So there's certain world-ending cataclysms that I'm not interested in because I know that I understand the end of things. So because of that, I think it ought to free us as Christians immensely to have these huge pursuits. And I certainly hope that we as a church will think about that more and be more eager to take that kind of, to be willing to take up power and use it in good ways.
Thank you so much for that, Zach. And if you want to hop off and come right back in, you had a few mic issues though. I think we could do better. It wasn't that bad. We pretty much caught you. But if you want to, I think that was really beautifully put. And I do have to bring up this tweet that I reposted of yours, Base. And I can't help but think there was an amount of a subtweet to the conversation that was just blown up since Thursday. I know it was a retweet and you posted it originally in December. But you said your question was, will men deny their own divinity for want of a greater God? Can you really unpack that and your thinking of that tweet?
My pin tweet. Yeah. What do you think it means? I mean, what do you think about it?
Well, I expressed, I know you retweeted it pretty recently.
Yeah, no, it was
Friday
not
or Saturday.
actually.
Was
that
it not a
was
subtweet?
totally no. That was totally coincidental. Okay. I just think it's like really hitting at something I'm trying to like unearth right now, and I made this post in Pirate Wires today with my friend Nadia, and you guys can check it out. My kind of like yeah. I mean, I think that speaks for itself. There's a number of other like things that are kind of in that cluster of ideas that I'm working out, and hopefully there will be a lot more to say about this. But yeah, what do I mean? Like I think that in that tweet, right? It's a little bit of like a jokey thing about people who want to just not build better AI. So it's actually not that deep or anything. I think like, yeah, right. If you think about it, there is like a sort of maybe a bit of a straw man, but just for fun way to frame, the sort of decel position on AI and AI development as like, we need some sort of like absolute guarantee about the character and nature of this thing that we're going to build, and therefore we need to like spend 5,000 years writing math proofs and trying to assure that it will have all these properties and so on and so on and so on. And I think like in a way like they're imagining something that they can't really build, and I think that's part of the kind of fundamental flaw in that position set out by people like Yudkowsky and so on, so many years ago. And no, to me, like when I say like the divinity that humans have, like, I mean, I obviously mean this in a way that is like coming from my kind of agnostic perennialist sort of perspective, but I do think that like in building technology, like there is a thing that we're trying to get closer to, and there is something like quite magical about it. And I think like as we build more, it gets more magical. And I also think that like, this way of, there's like a way that the mind and the body respond to thinking about technology and the development of technology and the kind of communal process of evolving civilization forward. When you use this kind of language and when you think about it, sort of in this way. And I think like, I don't know, I'm just experimenting with that right now. And I think we are kind of, I think my core contention, in this piece. So I called the piece that we put in Pirate Wires, the ethos of the divine age. And I think my core claim or something, the thing that I see is happening is that, there is like there's like a set of things that we could say are probably going to come of technology if we just keep evolving it forward. And I think like we ought to move there. And I think it would be wrong to say that we are not moving closer to, and increasing the expression of our like divinity in that sense. And so, maybe the Christian way to say this is that we are moving closer to God. Maybe, this is the right way to say it. I don't know. But, if there's something in me that feels like that, it is this, the capacity to, really do things inside of the universe that are like, absolutely incomprehensible to people in the previous time step of the universe, right? So it's like, you can imagine in the not so distant future that we are doing things that, radically change, what's happening, for, any given part of, space. And, like, it will just appear as magic. Right. So, we can think about, really advanced manufacturing, really advanced AI, as we start to push up against the limits of what computers can do, in the universe, as we start to push up against the limits of like how much energy we can produce in a given, chunk of space time, as we start to push up against the limits of how much intelligence we can squeeze into a chunk of space time, what we're going to see is that things just start to happen more like we specify them and then they occur. And it's like the most minimal inputs can produce any outputs. And like it feels like we're trending towards this thing, and over time it will just become more and more powerful. And what to me that looks like is we become much more powerful inside of the universe, right? And I don't know, I think this feels like something that is happening. It's already happened. If you look at our, kind of power over time over the universe, our mastery of the universe over time, it's like increased significantly. And I think it's just going to keep increasing. And I think there's a religious way to say this. There's like a religiously sounding way to say this that appeals to me. And I'm a compatibilist. I think it's like very reasonably, you can very reasonably frame this as like compatible with Christianity or another religion that you might choose. It doesn't particularly it's not, particularly part of my goals here to be that, to have that feature. But What do you guys think about that?
Well, to respond to you, and I'll pop over to Isaiah right after. But I will say, like, no doubt, like that type of language is what's going to set Christians off and scare obviously a number of Christians in the space. The concept of assigning divinity to man on a higher order above God. But to respond to you, as far as the actual
I wouldn't
language,
use that inequality though.
What's that?
I don't know. That inequality doesn't come out of it.
Will men deny the divinity in want of a greater God?
Oh yeah, no, sorry. Sorry. I thought we were putting that to the side because that was just like a meme about like people wanting to build like an AGI that is like perfect or something. And
oh yeah, I totally got you. You were applying it mainly to the AI space and not necessarily to the Christian conversation. But I still think that the language, if you're asking for language, I don't think it's interesting. I don't think it's entirely incompatible with Christianity to the extent that the language is what Ancelotto was saying was the Imago Dei, the concept that humanity is the image of God and that we are approaching, total mastery of the universe through the Genesis command, essentially, to go out and to subdue the earth and to take dominion. And that's frankly why Christianity is so optimist and so prevalent in the space, is because of those doctrines. Isaiah?
Yeah. Well, I think absolutely what you're saying, Connor, is right. This is fundamentally, directionally what Christianity is saying. And you can just like look back and see the evidence. We have been increasing our power over time, over nature, and even in a magical sense, right? So, Bays, you're talking about we're going to see things that we would call magic, and I'm in the business of magic rocks. There are these rocks in the Earth's crust that have an enormous amount of energy when you break them apart. So nuclear fission, right? And honestly, like nuclear fission is a very basic, somewhat old technology at this point. I'm working on it because it's already pretty developed, and you don't have to have a bajillion IQ to massively lever humanity with it, unlike fusion or AI. But but yeah, that's where we're going for sure. But I think what is important about like Christianity's mix into this is that a world where humans just become more and more and more powerful without like a transcendent, direction or a transcendent meaning behind that power is something that I don't know that I would find that compelling. And I'm curious, Bays, on your personal, like emotional feeling about that. Like, do you find that world compelling in which humans are more powerful? Like we are simply able to, as you say, sort of input into the universe, reality happens type world. It's interesting. Like that's an interesting world. It's also a gigantically terrifying world. And like, I think the Christian response to that is like, yes, and it will be, and it will be moral. It will be good. And like the morality and the goodness of that is something that you have to have a transcendent frame for.
Yeah, I think that the thing, so it's a complicated question, right? I think like we don't get to sit here and say what will or will not happen, right? Like we can determine some of it. And so there are things going on out in the greater, world and maybe much further away from Earth, that like in some sense we just have to actually be like competitive with, right? If we, let's say we all have some intersecting beliefs that we think are like pretty overlapping, we're like, all right, let's aim at this thing. We all just like shake hands and say, all right, cool. We'll aim at that. Like a bunch of people don't agree. They want to like burn down museums. They want to like, have like 1/50th as many humans every year until there's only 100 humans left, and then let the other humans die. And then, like this is like, these are real factions out there. And so I think part of the one of my original things here, like one of the original critiques of AI doomerism that I would say kind of ended up becoming part of EAC, something an argument that I was making for a while before EAC was even a thing, is just that like they're very clearly ignoring the competitive landscape. They're pretending like they're going to create some shiny new institutions so that we have perfect cooperation at national scale, at the state level, at the international scale, and so on, right? And I think that was just like, to me, delusional mostly. And I think we've already seen like the consequences of what it looks like when you have AI progress happen rapidly in a period, and institutions try to adapt. It's like they basically just talk about it a bunch and don't do much. And the regulations that do come out aren't very useful. They don't really prevent anything. Now we'll see what happens. Like, I'm not saying they can't pass legislation that will have a meaningful impact on AI or other technology. Clearly, we know, like in nuclear, it's had an impact, right? But I think like, we can't just sit here and say like, we don't like that thing. Like, I mean, like, unless we're willing to compete, right? And so to me, like, the way to compete is, it's like fitness. And I think that looks like, there are other ways to compete, right? People in history, the way they compete is they go to war, they kill and do terrible things. I personally think that this is not a good strategy. It's not a great strategy. It has, number of downsides, chief one being just kind of an asshole thing to do. But yeah, so competitiveness, right? I think like, the world where, this is a feature of our world. So unless we're planning to erase competitiveness, I think as soon as you allow that there are, dynamics where some people will get a little bit more powerful at time t, and then other people will observe that, And then, time t plus 1, those people who have made the observation will try to get a bit more powerful than those people who did at time t, and so on, on forward, over many, many time steps. Like, you will have that people get more powerful over time. And I think, like, this is just the case. And so there are many incentives for why that happens, right? It's not just power over one another. It's power over the environment, right? So, the ability to have more, material wealth, the ability to, have, let's say, like, we need very large computers to do simulations so that we can invent perfect drugs or perfect, treatments for diseases and so on, right? Like, there are all sorts of ways that this might manifest, but I think all of the incentives are there for us to keep going in this kind of iterated game of ratcheting up the power levels in society. And another kind of fundamental thing that I think is, like, become kind of a key piece of, like, the EAC frame around these issues around AI is, like, well, people are very scared and frame, powerful AI when it comes into existence as, sort of like this massive, infinitely sharp spike on the power landscape, right? Like, this is like the Yudkowsky view, right? As soon as you invent a sufficiently intelligent AI, it will bootstrap itself up instantly. It's kind of infinitely powerful right away. And it just kind of dominates everybody else. It's like a grandmaster chess player playing, a bunch of kindergartners, who, have never heard of chess, right? And, I think that this is, like, a really, really silly way to frame the problem. But I think even if you accept it, the way to stop it from happening is not to try to, create totalitarianism, to shut down the world, to, have, like, one government that just watches over everybody, to stop the computers from being sold and developed, to, have, all these very harsh, regulations on things, and, to try to clamp down variance, basically, right, around, AI development. But because ultimately what you're going to do is create a world where you have, like stagnation in the government, in that panopticon totalitarian sort of, world. Like, you're going to probably have stagnation, probably have things kind of go wrong. Eventually you'll have the potential energy buildup that somebody will get their hands on a powerful AI, and it will create, it will discharge potential energy that is built up. And so a way around this is to try to ratchet up the power levels of everyone, roughly in a way that kind of conforms to a shape that we know is stable, which is like the one we have, today. Or, sometime, you sample sometime in recent history, I think we see that there's, like, a nice equilibrium right now. Now, the rules change a little bit. Like, how do you solve for an equilibrium, with very powerful, AIs, with the potential for, new bioweapons, new, maybe like the unknown unknowns of new technology and so on. But I think, like, for sure, in order to have the capacity for defense, in order to have the capacity for, offensive security, in order to have the capacity to do any kinds of things like this, where we ensure and solve for an equilibrium, we cannot have, like, huge power differentials, but between groups, between people. And so I think if you accept most of, or any, or all of that, you end up with conclusions like, we will end up in a world where, in a universe where, we've, like, really ratcheted up the power levels that are accessible. And how we manage that is, like, one of the modern problems that we must face. Because absolutely, right? the reductio of this that you can talk about, is like, would you, many people are pro Second Amendment, but would you be pro Second Amendment if it included, everybody having, over the shoulder, missiles, as, like, a universal basic good? Every year you get one over the shoulder missile shipped to your house by the government. And, it's like, most people would be like, no, that's, like, too powerful, right? I think, like, at the moment, right? So I think this is a true reductio in the sense that it's, like, kind of not to the point. It actually misses the point. I don't think AI works like this. And I think, in general, most of the things that people want to do are, like, creative, right? So, like, the destructive power, the kind of instantaneous entropy increase of these kinetic weapons of the conventional era, conventional war era and previous eras of conflict and violence, are not going to be the kinds of things, that we have. One thing we haven't talked about here at all is like the role of like VR and like the kind of incentives for like the virtualization of society and stuff, which I think are kind of, I'm not a huge fan of like people, like in a way that's a way to seed power, right? So you can imagine that, a government that wanted to build a totalitarian regime might be very incentivized to try to coerce or even just nudge people over time more and more into virtual worlds, because these are controllable worlds. These are worlds where people can't really do anything that's going to harm base reality, as we know it. And so, I don't know. Personally, I'm not like a fan of that solution. I think it's kind of dark. I think it kind of creates these conditions where people, I mean, obviously are quite disempowered. They may lose skill and ability to navigate reality. I mean, it's like very much, you can imagine a lot of not great things. But, yeah, so to me, this is like one of the big, longer term trends that we're probably fighting against is like, and maybe the last thing I'll say about that is people are pretty incentivized to actually just go into those worlds anyway, because, probably, just because of like basic reward hacking and the sort of funness of those things, the how compelling those environments will become. And I think like, yeah, it's good to keep it would probably be good to have them be correlated with reality, to have, like base reality, as opposed to sort of like an Inception like world where there's just people who are like asleep all the time. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Base, and to maybe kind of realign the conversation a little bit too, because you mentioned the point about, can we stop it, and these people developing AI safety regulations, whatnot. Frankly, the way I see it is, we're co-belligerents in this war. The idea that Christianity really has any sort of institutional power to stop these forces that be, or even that these forces that be are aligned with us is a complete myth. So we're definitely pro overturning these power structures, and I think that's what draws a lot of us to this space, open source technology, the development of all emerging technologies. So yeah, we're definitely co-belligerents here, and I think there's a lot of alignment with Christianity and EAC. And again, though, I guess there are boundary conditions, and I do appreciate you bringing maybe some of those types of technologies that you would oppose. I mean, I would say like just broadly, I don't know if you're into like eugenics or anything along those lines, gene editing, but there's probably going to be a limit there where Christianity is not going to carry forward.
Yeah, I think this goes back to
All out
the
tech
thing,
development.
like this goes back to the dynamic, right? So there's going to be like people are going to do it. People are going to,
Well,
as soon
again,
as it becomes,
it's sure it's going to do it, but I'm saying that Christianity is not going to follow, and it's going to oppose that, and it comes down again to the Imago Dei, this concept of the image of God and the eternal value of the
yep.
human soul, even the least of these. And so you're going to say
One,
people are going to do it, sure, but Christianity is going to say the fruits of those results it's not going to bear eternal fruit. Like it's going to be shut down.
yeah,
The thought that you're going to rise, you're going to deny your divinity, right? You're going to bow before God. You're going to kneel before God at the eternal judgment. So
yeah,
that's just theologically, like that's Christianity. So that's our response. Go ahead.
yeah. No, I think like, I don't know. Yeah, that's like an interesting sort of conversation, because it's like, it seems that probably most people are just going to be like, I want my kids to be taller and smarter and like whatever these kind of relatively superficial properties are, like, and I think like we don't really know what the maximum like max stats are on these phenotypes, but it's like probably people who were actually alive have like gotten close or hit them. So I don't know, it seems like whatever, but yeah, I do like, I always just go back to this thing about well, I guess the last thing I'll say is like, on this is just, people are going to end up with very different viewpoints. They already have very different viewpoints. And I think as you watch like power levels or potential power levels increase, over time, like the thing that we ought to try to solve for is like maintaining variance, but also maintaining, peaceful coexistence. And I think like many cases that may just be very much impossible to do in a way that's not like coerced, like, we've had, nuclear missiles pointed at one another for, 60 years or whatever, 70 years. I don't know when did we get ICBMs? I actually don't know. It was like 60s. I don't know. But so it's like, in a way, like you could call that like a peaceful period, but is it a peaceful way of solving for the equilibrium? No, but maybe it's okay because it's like basically stable. So it's not ideal. But yeah, I think my kind of hope for humanity, for like the evolution of civilization, is that over time we just have it so that we have the technological capacity and we have the organizational capacity, to allow people to like live the way that they want to live. Like, and if this needs to be enforced, like, by the speed of light, right? Like, like we have like true, like, libertarianism, like enforced by the speed of light. Maybe that's one way to do it.
Until Eric Weinstein cracks that, of course.
Yeah. And like, okay, like maybe then we have new rules. Is like, okay, we need to, it's like you kind of bubble yourself into a baby universe, and then maybe you can squeeze some of your most significant bits out, and then we'll never see you on the other side. But like, yeah, I think we do this now, right? We have like we allow people to live in remote parts of the world, kind of relatively undisturbed by modernity. We have there's Amish communities. There's there's many communities in the world that kind of live parallel to, and we're not like, in general we respect their right to exist the way that they want to. And I think like, I don't know, I foresee that we're probably going to want to try to solve for having many more pockets of culture like that.
That's fair. Derek, if you're still here, he says he's a former exec at Microsoft, which we hate. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead. If you want to jump in.
I am. I just wanted to say, before I go, because I'm running late on time here. Listening to the space, yes, I'm a former executive at Microsoft. Easy to look me up. I ran Windows strategy, ran global wireless strategy, business development, built digital division at Paramount Pictures. I ran the file sharing network Kazaa. I'm a technology person. The guy that runs AI at Microsoft right now, one of the main guys, was the guy that I hired at Microsoft. So I'm deeply involved in technology, but I'm also a deep and dedicated follower of Christ. So what I want to ask is, this is my issue with anything, is that, I have a YouTube channel, and I've got, my here on X, and the thing that people say, are you a Christian? It's a yes or no question. And they go, it's not a yes or no question, because I don't know what version of Christianity you are. I don't know which version of the 44,000 different denominations or the 22,000 different variations and iterations of the Bible. I mean, I'm a studier. I mean, I've studied Sanskrit, Hebrew, Aramaic. I speak, read and write it. I ran an Israeli technology company in 2001, 2002 with 75 of the best hackers, and the head of the Technion Institute was my CTO. So, I mean, I kind of know the landscape of the world, and I definitely and definitively know the understanding of Christianity as far as it comes to me, what me has experienced as Christ. And it's not a religion. Christ was kind of not liking religion too much, because that's organized and becomes corporatized, and people tell you how to think rather than you finding God on your own. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all of these things that, as he probably pointed at his head, will be added unto you. You will learn and understand everything. All of his words point to what? So here's what I want to ask you, Connor, is, from your guys' perspective here, and I'll say this 100%. I came into this space. I have no idea what EACC is. All right. No clue. I'm simply a follower of Christ. And base can laugh. That's not a laughing matter. I mean, come on. What, somebody doesn't understand what you guys believe and you want to laugh at them? Come on.
No, not
No,
that
I don't
bad.
think he's being negative.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying, I have no clue, but I'm interested.
We're just chilling, bro.
No, but I'm interested. I'm like, what is the idea? What is it? Because See, this is what I do. I've been talking about this stuff now for a decade. I mean, I have audiences and people that I speak to. I want to know what you guys are thinking, right? Because I have a whole different perspective on a lot of things. I don't follow anything except Christ's words. End of story. Because if he came here and he didn't say everything he needed to say, he didn't need Paul or somebody to come after the fact to finish up what he fucked up. Sorry for the words. He didn't. He didn't do that. Right? So I'm sorry. I give that guy a lot more credit than even many Christians do. I'm sorry. I only listen to his words. I don't listen to somebody else's, not even Peter or Paul, because they represent, in many cases, 12 elements of our psychological condition, our narcissistic aspects. He was using them and showing them and teaching them in different elements. I mean, this is a very deep lesson that we were learning from this man. And I think that we've kind of missed it. And when it comes to what's going on in the world right now and what's happening, oh man, I mean, there is so much going down that I don't think people even realize what he meant. So, I usually ask people, what was Christ's entire purpose in your mind? What was he trying to convey to you? What was the main message? Because there is one message. It's the gospel, right? The way, the truth, the life. My name is Derek. In Hebrew, the name Derek means the journey, the way. So he literally said, I am Derek. I kind of take that to heart, right? I am Derek too. I am on that journey.
Okay. Appreciate that. It might be helpful. I don't want to tell you this, but if we've just been debating this is the question of the whole space, right? What is EAC and how does it relate to Christianity? And the discussion's just gone all over the place. So it might be helpful just to go back and listen, because I'm actually in the same boat as you. I don't really know what EAC is, and that's what we're trying to come to terms with. And a lot of the conversation so far has been with Bays, who does not identify as a Christian. And we've been working through maybe compatibilities.
Yeah, what is a
Your
Christian?
comment,
Like, what is a Christian
well, okay, yeah,
anymore, right? Like,
to that
seriously.
comment, if I, yeah, no, I appreciate it. If to that comment, I will just say, and the denominations, people throw that kind of number out there. It's really, it's not really quite accurate. There's,
It's big, brother.
hierarchical
It's big.
denominations. There's a lot of, I'm not
I
denying there's
mean,
a lot of
no. I'm just
denominations.
saying, Connor. I mean, look, I've got a YouTube channel with 107,000 subscribers. I've done a
Yeah.
lot of research on this stuff. Okay,
Well, I
I've
want to
dug
talk to
in.
you more about this,
Yeah, I've
Derek, and
dug
actually
into
have a
all of this,
podcast. Maybe
man.
we
This
can
is,
get you to bring you on.
yeah,
But
this is the
if,
stuff that I've done, is what I'm saying. So I'm
okay, if
like,
you
yeah,
give me a
I'm not
second to
arguing.
respond.
Yeah, no, of course. I'm just saying, I'm not
Okay.
arguing with you, right? I'm just saying that
Mm-hmm.
this is the stuff that I've done, and this is the great conversation. You guys want to have it because these are real questions that I have, and everybody that's ever
Mm-hmm.
followed me has. So it's like, let's keep on those questions, because
Yeah.
the longer we stay on these questions, the more refined the answers become, and the more truths we find within them.
Mm-hmm. It is a big question, and I appreciate you bringing it up. And I'll just point back briefly in response to you. What is a Christian? 90%, probably even more, Christian denominations are going to affirm the Nicene Creed, the Athanasius Creed. So there are debates. There are obviously family disagreements to an extent, but any denomination, any Christian that doesn't affirm those creeds is not going to be accepted in a broader concept of Christians. And we have a broad, diverse subset of Christians. A lot of Pentecostals here. I know we have a number of Catholics. It's really all over the place. So we're willing to have that conversation. But again, the creeds, and they're not very long, they're very short statements, and the doctrines that we've been talking about here with the value of the human soul, the Imago Dei, these things are outlined in the creeds in very short couple of sentences. Anybody can go refer to those and really see what Christianity is, at least as it relates to this conversation with EAC.
I appreciate that. I'm not quite sure that gets into quite what is a Christian for me. Like for instance, like I don't understand what somebody's variation of Christianity is. I don't know, right? So it's
Well, again, and another central aspect of Christianity is that total human unity, that we're all going to be incorporated into the body of Christ. So we do see disagreements, not even just between Christians, but obviously between Christians and non-Christians, as a lot of our discussion has been today.
Well,
And
that is
Christianity
exactly.
preaches that we're going to see total convergence as we approach the end of time, that Christ is going to subsume all of creation as he began 2,000 years ago.
Well,
And so
let me just
yeah, go ahead.
let me just finish up, and then I'll drop down and allow some more space for some speakers to jump in. See, I kind of look at the Father in the way that Christ said. Do you have any kids, Connor?
I don't. I'm a
Okay.
monk.
Okay, you're a monk. Okay, so I have 2 daughters and 2 grandsons. If my children were kidnapped and sold into sexual slavery, and I managed to be able to rescue them after 4 or 5 years, or even a year, or whatever, would I point my finger in their face and make them repent for their sexual immorality under duress of being a slave? No, of course I wouldn't. I would spend the rest of my life trying to get them to forgive themselves, which is exactly the message of Christ, that you just need to accept the forgiveness that is already offered. It's already been offered because you are already a slave. You are already a captive. You are already in captivity. So that allows you to operate, and repentance isn't begging for forgiveness. It's turning away from, right? It's like not doing that anymore once you know that that's part of the enemy's plan. And I think people neglect to realize that this world isn't the Father's world, right? Even according to Christ. So people that are following Christ was in the wilderness for 40 days. Satan came and offered him the whole world and all the kingdoms that were in it. He couldn't offer that unless it was his to give. This is his world. Scripture says that time and time and time and time again. So, Christ told you that this was the fact. So if you're a follower of Christ, separating yourself from this world, and from the structures of it seems to be what he was trying to convince people to do, or speak to them directly about, because he didn't ever castigate any person walking on the street. He spoke directly and castigated the religious and political rulers, the Romans and the Pharisees and the Sadducees. So he went to them. That's when he called them hypocrites. He never called a person on the street a hypocrite, because they're slaves. They're already prisoners. They were born into prisons that they cannot see the walls of. And that's precisely what Christ was trying to explain to everybody. So as we go through this and we understand what it is, adhering and I would say espousing things that are contrary to that, regardless of the speaker. Christ didn't need to send somebody else to come and speak on his behalf, period. End of story. He already said it all.
Yeah, I don't think I would totally disagree with everything that you just said. I don't see why somebody who didn't commit a sin would have to repent for a sin they didn't commit. But these are conversations maybe we can have another time. Go ahead, Base.
Oh, I would just love to hear from Natalie. I think she's been wanting to say something for a while.
Yeah, I agree. She's had her hand up. Go ahead.
Thanks, Faze. Yeah, I have to leave in a minute, because I have kids. I need to get them ready for school tomorrow. But I again wanted to thank you, Connor, for hosting this space and for all the different speakers that have participated. I think it's a very constructive dialogue, and one I hope that people have come away with something to think about and to, apply in their lives in some way. I've known Baze for a while, and I have a deep respect for him. And it's been a great opportunity for me to collaborate him. He and I both coming from different angles on something that I think is really important for humanity today. And again, that's, building a better future. When I think about my kids, one of the things that's so beautiful about children is they have an amazing sense of wonder about the world around them that adults can often lose. But I think in EAC, we have a lot of, discussion, memes, all kinds of stuff about the amazing technologies of today. And these are truly wondrous marvels that humans are creating. And when we're contemplating the universe, and the meaning of it and why we're here and why it was created and our role within it, that too inspires wonder. And when I think about the role of wonder, it's wonder that truly inspires us to uncover and pursue knowledge. And in the end, whether you're a Christian or you're not, what we're all in the end pursuing is truth. And it's in this pursuit in the end of uncovering new knowledge, in that pursuit, we are actually making the world around us more human, not less so. I think a lot of people can get mixed up thinking that technology is actually dehumanizing the world, but technology is something that we have created. So in the end, as we progress technology, we're actually making the world more human around us. Technology does not create humanity, we create technology. And this is a really important distinction. It's an asset, and it's not something that we should fear. It's definitely a tool that we should use for good, but in doing that, we're making the world more human. And something I really wanted to make a point about is in this pursuit of the truth and in this pursuit of, creating technology and putting it into the world, there's a great analogy about how a bird flies. And a bird has two wings and it cannot fly with just one. So in this pursuit, we cannot rely on our reason alone. Like we'll fail. There's got to be an element of faith that's also applied. We must have faith and reason. And in the end, whether you're a Christian or not, everybody has faith in something. And whatever you put your faith in, it definitely influences the direction of your life and what you pursue and how you pursue the truth, how you pursue knowledge, how you build technology. So it's really important to remember that and to question it and to develop it. It's going to guide your life in any direction. And I think the last thing I wanted to say is today is the feast day of St. Thomas Aquinas. And, he's a giant of Christian thought. And I tweeted it earlier today, but he has this great quote about knowledge. And he says, love takes up where knowledge leaves off. And it's really important to know that as being human, love is an essential part of being human. It's part of our humanity. It was given to us by God. He loves us. We're meant to spread love in the world. And you cannot have knowledge alone. Love also is a critically important part. As a mother, I obviously know this very much. I can try to teach my children everything. The most important thing I can give them is my love. And through that, it inspires them to be better people, I hope. And that's the last thing I wanted to say is, there's a great quote that I love, which says, become who you were created to be, and you will set the world on fire. And I like to think about this with EAC because we are all different. We're all coming at it from different angles. I like to say, be the EAC you want to see in the world. Just make the world better in your own way, however you are, whatever your talent is, whatever your interest is, whatever skills you can bring, just do it. Just build. Go for it. And I love that so many different people from different belief systems, backgrounds, etc., are doing that. There's so many good examples. And I'm sure all of you have many examples in your own life. Just keep doing it. It will make the world better. And that's the best thing we can do. So thanks so much. And just really appreciate you hosting the space.
Thank you so much, Antalad. I'm sorry, I keep on
I'm gonna.
mispronouncing your name every time. Antalad? Okay. I'll get it, I promise. But I was curious too, Baze, are you saying you gotta be heading out?
Yeah, I'm gonna bounce, but
Yep.
thanks for the space, and hopefully, my aim is just to kind of hear how people are thinking about things, and I actually hadn't heard that Thomas Aquinas quote, but I kind of like it. It's I think it's sort of something that I think is lacking in the world is like epistemic humility, and it's something that I really don't like about rationalism, and yeah, I think I don't know. I think I'm hopefully this was helpful and useful conversation for you guys, and I'm down to chat whenever about these things. But yeah, overall, my impression is that